Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the September 5th meeting of the Town of Richmond Selectboard. This is Jay Furr. I'm coming to you from scenic Mitchell, South Dakota. I've been on a road trip for the last 3 weeks, but I'm coming home next week. Anyway, as we get going here tonight, I would like to wish member David Sander happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. 35.
Ah,
How many times? It's obvious.
good.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to make a public comment on any item not on the agenda?
Mary has her hand up.
Thank you.
And Mary, go ahead.
Hi there, Mary Holt. Thank you so much. Two things, if you'd be so kind. At some point, maybe not tonight, I'd like an update on the saga that continues on Maple Wind Farm. And the next one is a pretty big one. And this Thursday through next Thursday, we're going to be getting about 5 inches of rain. So flash flooding is imminent. And if those SOBs, yes, I said that and I don't care, at Maple Wind don't have a contingency in order for the 6 units they have down in the field, they should be prosecuted if they lose a single bird. Thank you.
Okay, to add a minor bit of clarification, during the previous big flood, Maple Wind Farm did lose quite a few turkeys to drowning, and we have been asking some questions and following and trying to see what legal steps should be followed at this point. And Josh, I don't know that we have an update back from Andy on that, do we?
Last I heard from Andy, he had completed his report and submitted it to Chief Cambridge for review prior to submitting it to the state.
The dead bird issue though, where were those taken to dispose of? I mean, we should have that outside of the report because that is a biohazard.
I will try to find out.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Mary. I appreciate that because that is something that had slipped from my mind. Is there anybody else who would like to make a public comment?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
I want to tell folks that they never need to buy crutches in town. That Front Porch Forum is a wonderful service, and we have an even more wonderful community that's very generous. So if anybody needs crutches, boy, all you have to do is post.
Now, plastic sheeting, on the other hand.
I know that one hasn't been as popular.
Okay. Are there any additions, deletions, or modifications to the agenda? Being none. We will now move into our agenda. Item A on the agenda is consideration of approving a vendor for the purpose of a rescue truck for the fire department. I would appreciate if this is a fairly detailed item in the memo. So Josh, I'd appreciate that if you could kind of summarize for the board and for the public.
Did I agree to do that, or the chief or the assistant chief?
Oh, I'm sorry. If the chief and assistant chief are there, by all means, let them do it. I couldn't see the audience.
Honestly, Jerry, all I would be doing is really reading what you wrote. You could probably walk through the process a little bit better. Unless you want me to basically read what you wrote.
No, I think, yeah, let's have Jerry and Dennis present.
I'm asking Jerry if you see how he wants to proceed.
I can give you a ballpark.
I think you'd do a better job than I would.
Yeah, so we started looking last November about replacing a truck in 2027 with our 20-year plan that we've been talking about in the capital plan. We did go out to 7 different vendors and only 3 vendors replied back. One was Midwest, the other was Spencer from Maine, and Shakerly from Albany, New York area. The difference between the 2 trucks is Shakerly is a stainless steel bolted truck. And we have 2 of those trucks now. And we're very satisfied with the service that we're getting from them. The other 2 truck vendors are a poly aluminum type body. And there's not very many of those type trucks here in Vermont. There's one in Stocksboro, and Bolton has ordered a tanker for one. So Midwest truck came in around $531,000. But it did not meet the specifications that we sent out to them. Spencer came in at $576,000. And Shakely came in around $604,482. So we took a vote of the members on the committee, and I would like to thank the members on the committee for almost 10 months worth of work to come to this point. And because of the good service we've had from Shakerly, we recommend that we put in the capital plan and sign the agreement. It'll be 800 days after we sign the agreement, or 160 weeks to receive this truck, which would put us out in 2000, roughly 27 budget year. So again, we are satisfied with the service from Shakerly. They've stand by it behind their quality of work, and whenever we had an issue, they have taken care of a few issues and never charged the town of Richmond. The other thing
Okay.
is, well, we'd have to pay for the chassis when they got the chassis. And right now, we're looking at about a year out on the chassis. And it's approximately 135,000. This says 132 here, but.
Okay.
Any questions?
Right, does anybody on the select board have any questions?
Jay, I have a question.
Jeff?
So, we would take delivery of this in the 2027 budget year.
Approximately, yes.
It takes 3 years to build these
800 days or 160 weeks.
for one truck?
Some of them are longer.
Do they have to mine the ore for the steel in order to get that? Is that-
Well, there's probably a couple of orders ahead of ours.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of orders ahead of ours.
It's just surprising. Okay, I was just curious.
Yep.
I thought you were gonna ask if it was going to be electric. That'd be interesting.
Okay, are there any other questions from the select board?
Yeah, I just
Any
had
questions?
one.
Go ahead.
Let's see, you guys said, something about, you changed some options. What, I didn't see any further,
Oh, yeah, we have options that they give us to add equipment or
oh, okay.
take off equipment. So a couple of the options that I can't exactly remember, but it's like on-spot chains for the wintertime.
Oh.
Things like that we put in as, we'll definitely get them because we need them on the interstate
Just press a button.
and
Puts the change on.
change down.
Imagine not having to do that.
And just a few things like that, that we're gonna build a nice console in the middle of the truck so we can have all our radios, our meters all in one place and charging. You know, they charge extra for having specialty items in there,
That makes sense.
and we will have a refrigerator,
What's the lifespan of the truck? Any
20
idea?
years.
20 years. Okay. Well, we don't need one for a while.
Okay. Any further questions from the board?
Jay,
Any
I
members
had-
of the pub, oh, go ahead, Jeff.
Jay, I had a further question. It's less for Jerry and more for, maybe Josh, I'm not sure. So where does this fit in our capital, plan? Do we have reserve funds to pay for the 130,000? And
Unassigned.
So it's a combination of unassigned funds in this year's budget and then reserve funds, and that's assuming that the capital reserve is funded at 150,000 in FY 24 and then 250,000 in 25, 26, 27, and 28. But that's in the approved capital plan right now. If we get into the budget season and determine you'd rather take a loan for that, we could still get a loan going forward if you needed to. We'd have to go to the voters for approval on a loan though.
so what would happen if we went to the voters for a loan? And they turned it down? What would happen to that $130,000 deposit?
Well, we would still buy the truck. We would just buy it with raising taxes and contributing to reserves.
Do we need to pay the full amount up front, or is it,
You can pay the full amount up front.
do we get a discount for that?
Thought we bought the chassis, then we bought
Well,
the,
A
that-
rough
that's not
discount that they gave me would be $31,115.
Okay.
That's paying 90% of it.
Mhm. Okay.
So when we pay the chassis up, when we pay for the chassis, we actually save $8,928 when they get it delivered to them. So we do save
Yeah.
some money there.
That's worth doing.
But they do have a breakdown. If you want here, I can tell you.
No, you answered my question. Josh might want that, or Connie.
Okay, any other questions from the board? I don't see any hands up in the Zoom, and didn't see a hand up in the audience, but is there anybody in the audience on Zoom or in person who would like to ask any questions? Okay,
I
seeing
don't see-
none. If there's no further questions, does anybody wish to make a motion? There is a motion in the memo.
Jay, this is David. I move to purchase a rescue fire truck from Shakerly at a price not to exceed $604,482.
I'll second. Lisa?
Okay, any discussion on the motion?
Jay, yes, I have a question on the motion. We're approving for the total purchase price, not for the purchase of the chassis. Is that
Correct.
correct? Okay, and if during budget season, we decide that we'd rather take a loan out for this, would that require a different motion at that time?
I don't believe so. This is
Purchase.
authorization to spend the money, but not address
Not
where
how
the money
we
comes from.
do it, okay.
I've got one question. for you. If we sell the old truck, the old rescue truck, whatever money we get for that would be put towards this truck.
Right.
And the last truck we sold, we expected 20,000, we ended up got 45,000 for it.
You did well.
Yeah.
It only needed a frame and engine and a tank. Outside of that, it was a great truck.
Did you buy it, David?
I did not.
It's still running. You guys got it in a while.
Let me just follow up on what Jeff asked, because maybe I read your email incorrectly, Jerry. Does the 604,000 include the 130 for the chassis, or the 130 for the
Yes.
chassis is in
It
addition?
includes everything.
Okay, so that is the total price. Okay.
Okay.
So the chassis is 130,228, and then the final outfitting of the truck is on top of that for a total of 604,482.
Correct.
That's, yeah, chassis and truck. Okay, that's what I thought. I wanted to make sure.
Some of which will not be paid in the very near future.
Right.
Right.
The estimate is a year for the chassis.
That was a
Okay.
great letter.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there another question?
No, I would just would like to have you authorize Joss to sign the appropriate paperwork.
Which engine is that?
Okay.
To be our rescue one truck. the
No,
one-
the engine in the truck, which,
So it doesn't have any water or anything on it. And what we're trying to do is make one truck capable to handle the interstate,
right.
so we don't have to keep sending multiple trucks up there.
Sounds good. Any
Diesel?
further?
Think we're ready for a vote?
Okay, the motion is to, purchase a rescue fire truck from Shakerly at a price not to exceed $604,482. Motion was made by David Sanders, seconded by Lisa Miller. Please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa? Aye.
David, aye.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Thank you, Dennis and Jerry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, our next item is consideration of appointing members to the Volunteers Green and Browns Court Project Committee. So a little bit of background, I'll try to be brief. The remaining ARPA money that has not been spent on town center or sidewalk or other projects is currently floating around, more or less designated for recreation. However, we want to make sure that the money is spent in a fashion according to the wishes of the town and not just on the first projects that come along. We agreed to form a committee, more or less called the Volunteers Green and Browns Court Project Committee, and solicited applicants to be on that committee. We received 4 letters of application. The letters were in the packet. We have from Kendra Ziske, Megan Andrews, Jeanne Agner, and Denise Barnard. Is there any discussion or questions about this topic?
Jay, I would have a comment.
Go ahead.
The letters of application for this position were really well written, and these appear to be really good candidates in my mind. And my only question is 4 is probably not a good size for this committee. And so I would suggest that we go out. I would definitely support these 4 being put on the committee. And we go out and ask for more volunteers and set the number of people for this committee at 7.
That's the same number I was thinking of. Yes, great minds think alike. So yeah, we could amend the motion to say, the motion in the packet is to move to nominate. Do we want, Josh, the motion in the packet says, I move to nominate. Should that be moved to appoint?
Yes, should.
Okay, so the motion would be, if someone wishes to make it, I move to appoint Denise Barnard, Jeanne Agner, Kendra Ziske, and Megan Andrews to the Volunteers Green and Browns Court Project Committee, and to set the size of the committee to 7 members. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, just Denise's name and in there, so it's correct.
Yeah, okay.
And it's Jeannie Agner.
And Kara's out.
Okay.
So,
Okay, is there anybody in the audience? Go ahead.
Kara?
I know Josh is very busy and he's on a lot of committees. But I think a level of expertise with how pricing and things like that have been done in the past. I know Josh is the president of the baseball organization as well. So I'd like you to consider, and he to consider, the 5th position being held by him, because he can bring a lot of expertise with all the departments, et cetera. So I would really like Josh to consider sitting as one of the committee members. The other option is I kind of really would like you to go with 5 so that you can move forward with this, because my concern is that it's going to get delayed and you have a clock ticking for the end of March. And if the longer you delay it, and then somebody has to come on later and get caught up and revisit everything that's already been done before, because we know we had to do that on the ARPA side of things. Would be is maybe have your town planner have a little bit of time on this as well. I think the town planner might have a level of expertise that they could bring to the table as well. So those are just a couple of recommendations, but you all can do whatever you want. But I think Josh does have a level of expertise on the baseball side.
Josh, if you want me to take any of your jobs now, I got time.
Or he could just participate as a non-member, but
Yeah, I don't know that I have time to fit a full committee membership into my schedule. I'd be happy to try to help provide support, and I know Keith probably would as well, but I know even with Andrews Community Forest Committee, he had some time, but not a lot. So as we continue to add a lot of projects, happy to try to help, but I just, I'd rather not be formally on the committee. So if I need to skip a meeting, I can skip a meeting without fear of losing a quorum.
You could try being a consultant.
Well, like in my town manager role, I would happily be a staff/consultant. Yeah.
Thank you. And one more thing, Jay, if you go with 7 and a quorum becomes an issue, that's my concern. You could start with 5, try to find that 5th member so that they can move forward. And then as you have more candidates down the road, you can expand it to 7, but you're going to lock them into having a problem with a quorum if a couple people miss the meeting. So please go with 5 tonight and then expand to 7 if you get more people.
Okay, members of the select board, any questions, comments, concerns, ideas?
Yeah, I would respectfully disagree. This is an issue, it's a hot issue in town. And I do think it would behoove us to have as large a representation as possible.
So I think, I guess just one point is like, if it was 5 right now, the committee could start meeting with 4, like tomorrow, and they'd have a quorum.
Right.
If you get to 7, it gets a little harder, and then if we get 3 letters, well, then next meeting, just go with 7. I think, I mean, this is loosely, I mean, it's formed by the select board, you can change it at your will.
Okay,
But if we make it 5, then we can't go advertise for 3 more.
But if we get 3 applications, then at the next meeting, if they all look good, you could say, you know what? Let's go 7. If you felt like you wanted to, it would give you the options. If you only get 1 application, you could stick with 5. So, I mean, well, just, I think that it allows you a little bit more flexibility, but, well. again,
I don't mean to be a pain, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move to appoint Denise Barnard, Jeannie Agner, Kendra Ziske, and Megan Andrews to Volunteers Green and Browns Court Project Committee and set the committee at 7 members.
and we have a motion. Is there a second? Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Lisa.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
What are the rules, the operating rules for the committee? Is it pretty much like any other town committee, or are they authorized to change their size themselves? They find that they need more?
No, they cannot change their size themselves. We would have to do that. But the remit is essentially to solicit input and come to the select board with plans for what should be done at Browns Court, what should be done at Volunteers Green. We know that there's pretty wide support for a pretty major overhaul of the band shell, but there's not a lot of clear guidance on things like pickleball, tennis, gaga pits. And so we're looking to have them talk to members of the town and say, at the end of the day, what do people really want? And then they would come back to us, and then we would, of course, have to contract with engineering firms to come up with estimates, because, we don't know how much revamping the bandstand would cost, but first we have to get a sense that that really is what's wanted.
And Jay, this is Bart to point out that we have an up to figure and a timeline. So that sort of sets the context for their work.
Any other discussion before we move to a vote? Okay, the motion as made by Jeff Ford, seconded by Lisa Miller, was to appoint those aforementioned 4 Richmond residents to the committee and to set the size of the committee at 7 members. Please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, nay.
Bart, I'm going to abstain.
Take an interest.
Bard, you abstained? I'm sorry, Bard, you abstained?
Yes.
Okay, I will vote aye. So that's 3 to 1 to 1. So the motion passes, but as Josh has said, we can certainly revisit it. But I think it would be worth doing to ask the existing members. The 4 members that now exist do form a quorum, and if they can find a time that would work for all 4 of them, there's no reason they cannot go ahead and start bouncing ideas off one another. Okay, our next item on the agenda, let me make sure I've got the, okay. The next 3 items on the agenda all pertain to police. The first would be update on the police chief hiring process and next steps. And Josh, that one's pretty much yours.
So over the last few weeks, we followed up with candidates from the police chief hiring committee identified as viable candidates for the Richmond police chief position. We had 1 remaining candidate who recently interviewed with the hiring committee and the select board. After these interviews, I made the decision to not continue with the hiring process with this candidate. So this now exhausts the list of candidates we had from the candidate search. So now it's time to discuss what options do we have going forward, among other things. Immediately reopening the chief hiring process to look for a full-time chief, reopening the process to look for an interim chief, or we could wait a few months and see how things play out with Heinsberg, and then make a decision in the future on hiring a chief, an interim chief, or continuing to move forward with Heinsberg. Or there may be other options.
Okay.
But there's lots of options.
Lots of options there. So,
This- Jay,
Bart, go ahead.
have been the three options that people have kind of kicked around. We go back again for full big recruitment, a sort of limited recruitment, or hold our cards for the moment while we see how things play out with our new chief services contract with Humps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's it.
Lisa, Jeff.
Well, I feel it's been going quite well. It seems that, we've had more coverage in town than we've had in quite some time. What was it? How many hours? It was quite a bit of on-call coverage. Over this period, it has been active. I feel like, Heinsberg has been responsive. I feel like we spent a lot of time on this, over the past 6 months to a year. It feels to me like this is working. We're also spending, we have an invoice in our packet tonight. I think we're spending something like $28,000 over 6 weeks was the last invoice that we had. Which if you extrapolate that out for a year is less than half of our budget. So we're saving money off of what we budgeted for. We're getting more coverage. And I would just as soon stick with what we've got and give it a try for a year. I see no harm in giving it a try for a year, and it takes it off our plate for a while and reevaluate next spring or before the contract expires. That would be my hope, and I would hope that we could kind of make a decision. That would.
Bart, David, Lisa.
I gotta go with what Jeff just said. I've got an agenda here with that item circled in blue already, because I already made up my mind on it before I got here. So I think we need to let this ride as it's going and see where it goes. If we have to steer it, we learn from it. If we really have to steer it, then we need something different. But I think it's going very well, and we long term, we need to set ourselves up with a more stable police force so that everybody around knows that we have a stable police force, and so that we benefit from the stability of having a stable police force. And I think this is the route to get us there.
Okay, thank you, Lisa.
Where we are now is a fantastic short-term solution. I'm very happy with the service from Heinsberg. I have doubts as to whether it's a sustainable long-term solution. It's in my mind similar to, oh, you need a car, so you rent a car. And boy, that rental car is really nice, but it's not really your car, it's a rental car. And that's the purpose for a temporary situation, but I think we need to be looking for a new car.
Okay, Bart.
The only sort of adjustment I would make in Jeff's description is that we could change our mind at any time. We don't have to say we're going to do this and we're stuck with it for a year. We could change our mind a month, 6 months, 9 months from now.
Let's go 6 months.
So I'm personally open to, like, let's see how it goes and keep tabs on it in real time and say, is it working for us? Is it a good investment? Are we getting good performance and quality? Recognizing that at any point in time, we could change our minds and recommend to Josh that he re-engage and recruit. I will say I've also heard feedback from people that is a diverse array of opinion. Everything from you really need to hire a Richmond chief ASAP to let's just bypass that. That's one end. To bypass the whole thing and just go into contract negotiations or shared governance with Heinsberg. And to remind people where the hiring committee approached this was a more interim approach, that we'd be better positioned to have a chief as we engage in those conversations. Not everyone agrees with any of that. I'm trying to share what I've heard from a range of citizens. And I think there is at least that range of opinions among the voters and taxpayers.
One
Okay.
message I consistently, we do need police services. And then there's
Sorry, I can't hear you, David.
one thing I've heard consistently from people is we do need police services, and then the opinion of how we get that fulfilled is varied. But that's one message I've consistently heard is we do need police services.
Okay, so my point of view is I'm very pleased with the level of service that the Heinsberg Police Department has provided us. It is pretty cost effective, as Jeff has pointed out. My end game, which is not going to happen in the next 6 months, maybe not for a year or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe decades, is to have a joint department. But as Bart is fond of pointing out, look at the police dispatch shared operation and how well that's been going. So I'm not holding my breath, but for the time being, I don't think we desperately need a police chief. I think we should see how things play out. I can't see anybody's hands up in the audience, but I do see that Patty Breshett has her hand up in the Zoom. Patty, go ahead. Patty, you're muted.
There we go.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I was trying to mute. I think that one thing I think everyone has said is that there's pretty much unanimous support for the job that's being done right now by the Heinsberg Police and by the chief. I called Josh or sent an email to Josh earlier this week and asked, is Chief Cambridge able to hire Richmond police officers? And the answer was yes. And I feel very confident in having experienced the officers from Heinsberg that Chief Cambridge would do an excellent job hiring Richmond police and beginning to build our department. So I don't believe that this is, like a rental car. I think that we have a real chief who is willing to work with both of our towns, who lives in our town, and who's doing an excellent job, and who can hire the kind of police officers, the community-based kind of police officers that they're hiring in Heinsberg. So I think this is a huge step forward. As we heard from the emergency folks, the rescue service, they would really like to see our police force stabilized. And as I think Lisa said, and I think the Richmond people would like to see that too. And that will, when Chief Cambridge is able to start hiring Richmond police officers, this will look like a Richmond Police Department as well. And my hope would be what you're talking about, Jay, is that we would have, Heinsberg Police and Richmond Police jointly, being a cooperative police departments between the two, and that would take a single chief to do that. One schedule, scheduling everybody. So I think this is a wonderful experiment. I wish you guys would just allow it to happen for a year so that Heinsberg knows and can predict what's going to happen over this next year. But you got to do whatever you got to do. But I think it seems like it's going well, and it fits our needs of starting to build our own police department as well. Thank you.
Hey, Patty, I appreciate your comment. Just one piece of clarification. And I know this would be unplowed ground here in Vermont, but would there not be a Heinsberg Police Department or a Richmond Police Department, but call it what you will, South Chittenden County Police Department or Heinsberg Richmond Police Department, where it's literally one department with an overseer board made up of members of both communities? But potato right now, I don't think we need to be continuing to search for a chief. I think we should let it ride for the time being. And again, thanks to the Heinsberg Police Department and their chief for providing excellent service. I'm not seeing anybody in the select board right now saying, let's reopen the search. And if somebody does feel that way, please speak up, because I don't want to overlook that. Okay,
Um,
then this,
they-
go ahead.
It's my only follow-up comment is, as for extensive experience with grants and contracts, it's just foolhardy to say, no matter what, we will do this for this exact period of time. You monitor it in real time. You hire somebody to install a wastewater line, and you say, I'm sticking with them for a year, and everything they do, they screw it up. You wouldn't say, well, let's wait for the year to go through and see how it works out. So that's my point. And in point of fact, we have a contract for both police services and chief services for about a year. The only point I'm making is that as our, I think, political and fiduciary responsibility to make sure that that's going well in the meantime versus we're not going to talk about it for a year, no matter how it goes.
Bart, I'm glad you brought that up. You know, there's another party to this too, Heinsberg.
Yeah.
We need to hear their input from time to time. If it isn't working for them, I'm sure we'll hear about it, but we should be a little more proactive and maybe in 2 months or some period of time, just get on a conference call with them or, yeah, see what they.
So we intend in that regard, a reminder that the Heinsberg Public Safety, like strategic plan review is imminent. And that was meant as the sort of starting gun for the next round of communication between Heinsberg and Richmond, and Heinsberg and Richmond. So we're sort of in this abeyance for a short period of time, arguably weeks now. So that will pick up again. And Jay, I want to point out there's a hand up in the audience here, and I think we should also give Josh an opportunity to speak as the hiring manager as well.
Okay, first in the audience, Kara, go ahead.
Thank you, Kara LaBounty. A couple of questions because it talks about, next steps for the police department, not just specifically just a chief. A couple of questions that I have. I've noticed that a previous select board member has a Richmond cruiser parked in their driveway for, I would assume, for speed purposes to prevent people from speeding on the Richmond Heinsberg Road. Is that the case? Or have they purchased a vehicle that we forgot to take the Richmond Police Department signs off from?
No, we parked the car there because there were some complaints of speed in that area in an attempt
Okay.
to see would it work to slow people
It
down.
does work, and I'm just letting you know because a car flashed its lights at me to say there's a police officer ahead when I knew there
Try
was
it in other
nobody.
areas too.
So that's
What's on me?
okay. So that's what I'm bringing to your attention is it should not just be a vehicle. Cochran Road has complained about speed for a long time, and we spent a lot of money putting in some speed
Devices.
some speed tracking,
Calming.
speed signs that don't work. Okay, multiple ones don't work. I haven't seen them working for the better part of the summer since they got installed. So my question is, if the average citizen out there wants a police cruiser parked in their yard, do they contact Josh? And can they get one, or is it just previous politicians that get one in their yard? I'm not being mean. People need to know this because people are saying things and I'm like, wait.
So I didn't
Okay.
even know the select board member, they emailed me and Chief Cambridge and he and I talked about it and we said, we've heard a few complaints of speed in this area. Let's give it a shot. We've also heard, let's try parking cruisers in other locations. We've never done it before. So we said, let's try and see how it works for a little while. So
Okay.
I had no idea they were.
Funny, that's
select
the
board member.
that's the road that Heinsberg police officers travel the most to come to Richmond is where we're gonna park a Richmond police cruiser. So just putting it out there, if you want to put it out in front porch forum, if you're gonna allow police cruisers to be in other yards to help with speed,
Okay.
please do that. But my next question is having to do with the rental car approach, right? It's a rental car. You used it.
No, I used it.
You used it, y'all talked rental cars, okay? These cars sitting in the lot, you had 6 of them, you've agreed to sell 2 of them. Have they been up for auction? Have they been sold? Where are we at with those 2?
One of them just got stripped and we're ready to get that sold. The other one's awaiting that same treatment. We'll get it out there soon.
Okay, and knowing we're not gonna have officers, is the current chief in Heinsberg already accepting applications for Richmond police officers?
So we've had think we've had the job posted for a while. I don't think we've had actual applicants for a while. So as soon as we get applicants, we will continue
Okay,
to
so
review
we
that.
have no applicants at this time and we haven't had for a period of time because they'd rather work and stay in Heinsberg. So that being said, what does the select board need to hear from the public? Do we need to do a petition to petition you to sell more of the vehicles? Because that is not managing assets by having them sit through last winter, going into another winter of these vehicles. Some of them are being depreciating and you sold off the oldest, cheapest, not worth anything. Meanwhile, the most expensive asset is depreciating and it's going to have issues down the road. Could get a mouse in it over the winter. Who knows?
Okay. Kara,
My
I appreciate this topic. I think this is, Kara, hold on. Kara, stop. This,
a question.
we are way off. I'll let you finish in just a second, but this is not, the police cars can be put on a future agenda. This topic that we're currently on was essentially the police chief hiring process and next steps. And we're getting way, way, way away from that. I just like to remind you of that. So I would like to ask Josh to put follow up on police cruisers on the next agenda, and maybe we can discuss that at the next meeting.
I'm sorry, Jay, I thought it meant next steps for the police department, not police
It doesn't
chief.
say that.
The announcement says, it does say,
Police department.
CJ, that's what it was warned at. So I apologize for taking it as how it was warned. My question just is, do you need a petition? And,
No.
okay, thank
So
you.
can we cut to the chase? So to pick up Jay's point, at the next meeting, we should talk about police cruisers and also the similar experience with the active speed signs. I go by them and they are not working. So that's not on the agenda, but I think it should be.
Thank you. And sorry to
Right, I
bring it up.
think that would be,
Thank you. So
no,
can I,
Kara, it's okay. Go ahead.
I thought it was the agenda. No, I apologize.
Jay, can I make one more comment?
Sure.
Okay, so, David clearly likes, vehicle metaphors, for obvious reasons. He owns about 30 of them.
That's not.
Bart tends to like relationship, metaphors. And, we've gone through, we're thinking about marriage sometime in the future. Right now, we're dating. I would suggest that the step we're in right now is going steady. Okay, and I'm actually serious about
You
this.
made Anthony put his hand up.
Well, let me finish what my
Yeah.
thought is. So, I think in order for Heinsberg to take proactive steps on how to deal with us administratively and moving our department forward, they need to understand that we're making some kind of commitment.
Mhm.
Even if you're going steady, you might break up over the course of the year, but it implies that we are serious about the relationship that we have, and we want them, we want the other person to make a commitment as we are making a commitment to them. So, what I would prefer to come out of this meeting, and I don't know if I'll get it, but what I would prefer is an affirmative statement that we appreciate what Heinsberg is doing right now. We feel like they're doing a good job. We see no reason to try to hire a chief for now or the foreseeable future, although we might change if we find some infidelity someplace.
I don't find it humorous. I mean, you all made me stop questioning something and now we're going to talk about infidelity, really?
I'm
Okay.
trying to stay on topic with the Heinsberg Police Department. And so I would like us to make a affirmative commitment to Heinsberg and the Heinsberg Police Chief to follow through with this process. At least for the
Okay.
contract, knowing it's not a permanent thing.
No,
Okay.
Jay?
Anthony had his hand up and now it seems to be down. Anthony, did you wish to chime in?
I was going to speak to the cars, but we can, if we're going to visit that again at another point, we could certainly wait on that.
Okay, so the topics that you raised, Kara, are worth discussing, but I'd like to have them listed on the agenda as individual items so people who are especially interested in those can come. The most immediate question before us tonight, and it could have been possibly phrased better in the warning, was what steps do we want to take regarding a police chief search? So I would be very grateful for your input at the next meeting on those topics, and I think that you have raised some interesting points about parking, where cars are parked, what we're doing with the cars that we still have. And so Josh has already made the note. I saw him start writing that we'll get that on the agenda for the next meeting. I'd like to move on at this point to a second police-related topic. This would be item D on the agenda, and I'd like to explain why this is here. The contract that was signed by both the Heinsberg Select Board and the Richmond Select Board states, after some back and forth with the attorneys, that the Heinsberg police working in our town will comply with Richmond policing policy. And my question to Josh has been, okay, what policies are those? We have at various times over the last 100 years passed various resolutions and made various motions about policy, but I don't know that we have written down in one place what the sum of those policies are. And my wish was to have something we could point to and say, this is in toto the policies we wish to have you follow. And the rub here is that per our attorneys, our current setup requires that the police chief, this is actually in the Vermont statutes, that the police chief, the direction, go ahead.
State statute, just for that, yeah.
State statute, section 24, subsection 1931, police officers, section B, the direction and control of the entire police force, except as otherwise provided, shall be vested in the chief of police. If the chief of police is absent or disabled, or if the chief of police office is vacant, the appointing authority may appoint another officer to discharge the duties. So clearly what's happening here is we have appointed Anthony Cambridge through the chiefing contract to provide those services. So legally speaking, the designation of those policies is kind of circular. We're saying in the contract that Heinsberg will follow Richmond policy, but then the state statute essentially says that by making Anthony the acting chief, the policy is up to him. So which has power over the other? Are we setting the policies, or does it at the end come down to him, because that's how the state statute is written? I had input into the packet as a starting point a list of preferences originally created by the Richmond Racial Equity Committee. And I know it's not in a policy form. It's just things that many people in Richmond have said they'd like to see. But it's not in a form where we can officially say that is the policy. If we wanted to go that way, to actually enact a policy and state in that policy what our preferences are, we would have to get it into a properly legal format, which we currently don't have. And so that's essentially the whole agenda item. The state statute says that Anthony will set policy. The contract says Anthony will follow our policies. Right now, there's no indication that Anthony or the Heinsberg police have been doing anything we wouldn't want them to do. But that's really why this is here at the end, is how can we tell them to follow Richmond policies if we don't have policies that we can point to? So I'll shut up and comment from go ahead.
I just want to, I guess, maybe clarify a couple of things, and then before we get to the board, if that's appropriate. So last week, Anthony, our Chief Cambridge, did come over, and he found the policy book. It's basically a 3-ring binder of policies.
Yeah.
So he's taken that to start to review all of our policies. So they do exist in that format. I haven't reviewed it myself to know exactly how they're organized, if there's an index that has, dates of adoption and whatnot, but that book of policies does exist, and Chief Cambridge does have that to review, and that is in the agreement that they will follow all of our policies and that we will provide them the policies. So that part's been done. I think for next steps, if the board wants to contemplate a new policy, it would be a bit of a lengthy process to take the paragraph from racial equity, build that into an actual policy. And then at that point, the board could basically make a advisory vote to Chief Cambridge, who's our interim chief, to adopt that policy as Richmond police policy, which is similar to the way we worked with fair and impartial policing a couple of years ago. Now,
okay. So, go ahead.
It seems like we may be over legislating this, since we have a policy direction and we have a chief, why don't we just meet with the chief about the policy direction and say, dude, how about a
Good
policy
point,
that
yeah.
does it?
Go straight to
Agree or
finish,
not?
yeah. Mhm.
And because,
Right.
yeah, rather than try to run around the statute, why don't we just take the statute in both the letter and the spirit of the law and have a conversation with the chief about what is racial equity, diversity, equity, inclusion look like.
Mhm.
And I'm thoughtful, it's not just racial equity, in my opinion, it's other forms of equity as well.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
have that conversation with the chief.
I think that's a valid point, Barton.
You stick my mouth in?
Yeah, please
Okay.
do.
Yeah, this is a really opportune time for Richmond's policing and Heinsberg's policing to kind of merge. It's a perfect opportunity. We've got the same person in charge of both forces. And if that works well, we will probably learn some things. Maybe they'll learn some things from us. And we'll both be on the same page. And I think that really sets us up for a future relationship if we choose to follow that too. I think it's a great opportunity.
Okay. So no action on this item is actually needed tonight, but I think Bard and Josh and Lisa have made good points. I think a discussion, a sit down would be good. I just want to make sure that we are in compliance with the contract, and it sounds like by providing the binder, we have complied by providing the policies we want the Heinsberg PD to follow. So if there's no hands up that I see in the Zoom, are there any hands up in the audience? Okay, seeing none. Oh, go ahead.
Nope.
Go ahead.
Mayor,
Oh, okay.
clear.
Okay, so moving on to the final police item for the night, and then of course we'll be coming back to police things at the next meeting. Police data. This is an item that I personally have heard about from a lot of people. They want to know how this started back when we had a Richmond Police Department. What are our officers spending their time doing? Are they sitting behind the 7-Eleven playing Candy Crush on their phones? Obviously we don't have a 7-Eleven. Or are they actually out there policing? And so what are they doing? How many arrests have they made? How many stops have they made? How many tickets have they made? There is a monthly police activity report that has been posted on the website. And if you go to the Richmond Town website and go to Departments, Police, under the police page is a link to the police activity reports. And Josh, if you'd like to share those, you're welcome to. You don't have to. But they're kind of dry. They don't provide a lot of detail about exactly what was happening, just that certain things took place. So right yet there. And then just like July, for example, because August just finished. So this is not in full police blotter format. I think we've all seen police blotter columns in various newspapers. This is not that. We've talked to the chief about maybe getting some more data and posting it periodically to the town website, to Front Porch Forum, what have you. The other aspect of this is there's a keen interest in the raw data itself in terms of things like how many stops involved a search, how many searches found contraband, what were the demographics of the people involved in the search. That data is available in the Valcour database. Valcour is a software package that the state police agencies use to track all this activity. I tried to put together some rudimentary public-facing dashboards on this and came to the conclusion I simply didn't have time. So Josh and I met with Simple Routes, which is our town's IT provider, to see if they could be of assistance in doing something along the lines of what the city of Burlington has done. The city of Burlington has some really marvelous dashboards that are obviously done by somebody who really knows what they're doing. Right now, Burlington has obviously a lot more data than we do, but we want to be as transparent as possible with our public about what is being done in the name of the town regarding policing. What, under the color of law, are the officers serving our community doing? And so there is more to come on this. But right now, Simple Route will be trying to figure out how they can take the dashboard data that I started with from Valcour and turn it into something meaningful. And we have asked Chief Cambridge if he can provide more data on the activity report. And that's pretty much all I have. Josh, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you covered it.
Any questions from the select board on this topic?
Yeah, Jay, just one thing, there's a note from the lawyer, the attorney to Josh about the word shall. It seems to be a requirement when the word shall appears in there. Since we're sort of developing this as we go, it's a bit confining or restrictive. And I don't know where all it appears, shall this and shall that. But data, for one thing, shall be shared and so forth. But until the method is worked out, till the group of data, the name of the data and where it's going to be posted, whatever, using the term shall is too restrictive to comply with at this point. So I don't know how we change that or if it has been written already, but we should keep it to some more gentle verb. May or timely or something like that.
Jay, point out that the police department activity reports are in fact posted on our website.
Mm-hmm. So we're already complying.
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
In a narrow sense.
Right, we are.
I
guess, yeah.
Shall and has.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Jay, can I make a comment?
Please do.
One of the things I've really appreciated from our various departments is the reports that we've gotten. We get a really good report from the planning director, Keith, that explains what he does over the course of a month. The Richmond Rescue report, quarterly report, while it's not our department, they report to us quarterly, and it's quite extensive what data that they give us to review, which I really appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a work in progress, figuring out the data, what fields should be reported. Like I noticed that this doesn't have any individuals or who's doing what, or how what was the activity that they were doing. It says call type. But it doesn't really explain what if there there is or not arrest charge. That's a field, but I wonder the Richmond Racial Equity has been thinking about this for at least 2 years. I wonder if we could ask Chief Cambridge to work with Richmond Racial Equity on a format of what data would be interesting and useful to report to us. And I wonder if we could ask Chief Cambridge to report to us. I don't know. I don't know how. If monthly might be too much, quarterly might not be enough, but periodically about issues related to the police. Now that he's doing the administrative work, we're going to have a lot of questions for him, like what to do with a car. I would assume that would be his responsibility to figure that out. He is figuring out doing that now. So, I'd like to see him on a regular basis and see how it's going from his perspective, and let us ask him questions about from our perspective.
Jay, as part of, I have a follow-up. It seems to me that, there are several things around police that perhaps a future agenda item is to give more time to the chief and include this there. I'm sort of sensitive that Richmond Racial Equity has paid attention to this, but it's a subset of all the interests in town. And the name itself is a somewhat restrictive definition, leaving aside their broader perspective. Racial equity is one of the, to my count, 7 issues in equity, diversity, equity, inclusion, as defined by the governor in his proclamation, and by this town in our proclamation. So I think it's appropriate to invite Richmond Racial Equity in, but I think our conversation should include, but not be limited to, their observations and recommendations. And maybe set up time where the chief has time to hear from them as well as others about what people would like to see in play.
The only reason I mention them is that they have focused on this, and they've met with the I forget her name, Cochran, who is an expert on this particular issue of data, and they might have some thoughts that would be useful on presentation.
I believe from the last Richmond Racial Equity meeting that I was at a week or two ago, or 3, I believe somebody said that Chief Cambridge has already agreed in principle to meet. I think it was just a matter of scheduling. Do I have that right, Patty? Or anybody else from Richmond Regional?
Jay, no, I'm reaching out to the chief to see if he would be willing to go, be at a community forum. We're hoping to do it in October, where people could meet him and ask questions and, begin that community conversation. But I haven't reached out to him. We haven't had a conversation yet about that.
Okay. But to Patty's point, RRE is working on having a public forum that anybody can come to, and hoping that, various responsible officials, including Chief Cambridge, could hopefully attend, so that this community can have a discussion. And I think that's worth having. Any other thoughts about data before we move on to the Housing Committee report? Okay, well, I thank everybody who has kept the fire under us about transparency in the data. I think it's critical that we are transparent, and I think that we have some steps obviously left to go, but at least there is an awareness that we need to take them. Our next agenda item is a presentation from the Affordable Housing Committee. And who will be presenting for the Housing Committee?
Yes, this is Mark Hall, who's the chair of the Richmond Housing Committee.
Mark, the floor is yours.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you. My name is Mark Hall, as I mentioned, the chair of the Richmond Housing Committee. We're a small but mighty committee here in Richmond, looking at housing needs across our town. I also have members Virginia Clark, who I think you all are familiar with, who also chairs the Planning Commission, and Connie Van Egan, who is our Richmond Housing Committee clerk, and obviously Keith, who is the liaison here. Tonight we have kind of 3 items that we want to share, and we're going to talk through. The first being a report, which was, I believe, all in your packets, on affordable housing site research, which was an ask from the select board to look into affordable housing opportunities throughout our town. This will probably take the bulk of our time today, but then Virginia is also going to review a number of other activities that we have been working on and have completed over the course of our, I think, couple year here existence as a committee. And then we're going to wrap up by talking a little bit about some updates to our committee charge, and just really highlighting some of the plans of what we're going to be working on over the next year. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to run through the presentation first. If you have a burning question, feel free to ask, but if you could hold your questions until the end of the deck, that would be great. So give me a second here as I share the screen. Slideshow share. And let me know when you're able to see that.
You see it?
We are.
Perfect. Great. So this report was compiled from some research done in the Richmond Housing Report that was completed by a consultant that we got a state grant to put together, Brandy Saxton with Place Sense. Conversations with affordable housing developers, Champlain Housing Trust, Cathedral Square, as well as speaking to members of our community. So really just reporting out on the research that we compiled. So just to kind of set a kind of a baseline here, right? I think many of us, if not all of us, have heard of, the needs of housing here in Vermont, not just affordable housing, but housing in general. There's the Building Homes Together 2.0 campaign, which I believe in 2000 set a goal of having 5,000 new units within Chittenden County come online by 2025, with 1,250 of those being affordable. Some of the latest data in 2021, I believe they reached 60% of that goal for that year, and 151 of there were hopefully 250 affordable housing units to be built, but only 151 were built in Chittenden County. So we then looked at, okay, where are there potential opportunities within our town in Richmond? We looked at and we connected with, as I mentioned, some of the larger housing developers like Champlain Housing Trust and Cathedral Square, and talked to them about what are requirements that these entities look for a successful project, right? What would work in their eyes and from their experience. And it's those attributes below, which is access to water, sewer, walkable to the town center, availability of public transportation. For financial viability, they're looking at a minimum of 20 units. Obviously community support, and they prefer to own and manage the land or the project versus having other owners of that land. So we use this criteria to apply this to a number of parcels, a number of potential sites across town, and use this to help evaluate their potential or possibility. So, in the scope of this project, we really just looked at these 4 primary parcels, and then there were some other parcels that were also suggested that we haven't had a chance to fully evaluate, but we did put some cursory comments in here. So I'll go into more detail, but I think many of us are aware of where these parcels are. The Willis Farm, which is in the gateway or on West Main Street heading out of town towards the highway. The Jolena Court Buttermilk development in town, Far Farm, Browns Court. And we looked at these because of some of those qualities that those larger housing developers would look for to make an affordable housing project possible. So I'm going to go through and the different parcels that we have here. I'm happy to circle back around if folks want to know a little bit more about them, but I'm not going to drain the whole slide. There's a lot of content in here. It was in your content in your packet, but I will kind of pick out some of the main items. So we looked at in the blue there, right? For each property, we evaluated the kind of the fit and potential based on those criteria that are in the blue, right? So the Willis Farm Gateway parcel, it's about 10 acres. It's owned by the Reap family. It's bordered by 89, Route 2, and it's heading in the Richmond Land Trust conserved property there as well. So some of the challenges that we have here is it's not contiguous to the village in terms of there's no sidewalks currently that can easily get folks from that property into the city center, the town center. Sidewalks, water, sewer. I know there was an attempt to get water, sewer out that direction, but I believe that has paused or been on hold as of right now. There is some zoning allowance there, but we would need to increase some density, which would mean a zoning change. And in speaking with the owners in their initial conversations, they're not interested in selling that land or developing it into affordable housing at this time. If you remember, one of the tenants of the Cathedral Square is they would like to own that property outright. Next is the Buttermilk development, Jolena Court there. And it does check a lot of the boxes that we have, right? It's in town, water sewer available, walkable. There have been, I know our previous town planner had a number of conversations with them. They don't have an interest in affordable housing at this time. And they do have an approval for their phase 2 of their project, which was approved by the DRB. I think they have some Act 250 permits still outstanding, but that kind of second phase is definitely well underway at the moment. Again, Far Farm. So I think we're familiar with the farm heading out towards Heinsberg. And you know, it does also check many of the boxes. I think in some informal, again, conversations with the owners, they're not interested in having housing bordering their farm. And really some of the thought was more on like, is there a piece of the farmland that's contiguous to make it easy to extend the sidewalk or something like that that could be viable. But again, I think there's limited interest from the owners of that property as well. And again, zoning would be another hurdle to need to get over. Grounds Court. So this is a piece of property that is actually owned by the town. So they have more of a say in what could be potentially done with this parcel. However, in our deliberations and discussions over this parcel here, there was definitely a lot of neighborhood opposition to any type of development in this on this parcel, and even, you know, in earlier agenda items this evening, looking at investing some more into that parcel potentially for recreational uses. So this is a potential parcel. It does check a few of the boxes, except for that neighborhood support. And then getting into those final two properties, which we didn't do a lot of detailed research, but we did a cursory review here. Railroad Street extension, so past the Richmond Rescue building there. I believe this is currently zoned for commercial, as that was the original interest of and intent of the owner. And it would require additional conversations to see if that was a potential possibility. And then finally, Riverview Commons, which is heading out of town. It does, you know, it's not contiguous to the village, not walkable. There's no water sewer out there. But the owner has expressed interest in increasing a number of home sites in the park. If we wanted to look at increasing density, you know, mobile homes tend to be lower density on parcels, but is there an opportunity to potentially increase density with that remaining land that's undeveloped at the moment? So that's a quick review of the parcels that we looked at, and you know, I think some conclusions that we drew from this, right? A traditional affordable housing project as developed by affordable housing entities such as Champlain Housing Trust, you know, require those previous conditions. And you know, I think Richmond is unique in a way in that we have limited property around our town center that would really check a lot of those boxes. That's not already developed, or you know, that's open land for development. Second point, Richmond's limited on that open space to make such projects feasible. You know, none of the options that were identified within the Richmond water sewer service area are large enough to host a traditional affordable housing project. You know, the mobile home park could seem most likely in supplying just affordable housing from these options. And, you know, I think a couple of things, right? Like, as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're a pretty small committee here. There's 3 of us on the committee. We've been looking for new members. We have this in our kind of plan to continue to try to increase our membership to be able to work on some of these other projects. And then, you know, I think, which kind of moves into the next slide, right? Like the select board here, you know, there are some needs to create some incentives for development and establish systems and funds to act quickly on opportunities to increase housing as opportunities arise. So I think building some of those mechanisms that would allow us to potentially look at, screen, invest, decide if there's opportunities, if an opportunity should arise to be able to act upon it. So final slide that I have in the deck here. What are some potential next steps for us? You know, we focus on identifying possible affordable housing strategies outside of the water sewer area while balancing climate goals. Focus on promoting more non-traditional affordable housing strategies in the water sewer area, such as missing middle housing, Habitat for Humanity. I think there could be some other ways to look at affordable housing that aren't more of a large project that we might think of that we see potentially in other communities. You know, multi-unit housing, duplexes, smaller lot sizes, etc. And then looking at, you know, commitment from the town, you know, is this something that we want to invest in, right? We want to incentivize affordable housing or create systems to identify and nurture and act upon those opportunities. I think one thing that the report that I mentioned earlier from Brandy Saxton at Place Sense, you know, there's definitely a sense in our community of we like things how they are, right? And the not in my backyard NIMBYism, and what do we do to you know, create a sense of you know, community and welcoming folks, and the need for affordable housing for our businesses, etc. And increased membership of the housing committee. So that was a lot. I spoke for about 15 minutes straight. And you know, happy to take some questions, or if Connie or Virginia have any additional points that they would like to make that maybe I missed in the presentation.
There's a couple of hands up here.
Okay, go ahead, guys.
Mark, what about the gentle infill, so-called gentle infill? It hasn't really had time to do anything yet because it's only been a concept for, I don't know, 6-9 months or thereabouts. To me, that seems like the lowest hanging fruit you could get. I mean, the land.
Explain that because everybody doesn't understand what you're.
Oh, okay, sorry. There's higher density allowances now in the village residential north and south, and the intent there is probably for landowners, families, to build a dwelling where it could be built, but currently or previously couldn't be because of zoning regulations. There's land there, there's sewer supply or sewer service, there's water. You can walk to the market, there's water, there's everything that you would want for affordable housing. And the lots are relatively small too, which takes care of part of the property tax and the initial purchase price. So but it's new. It hasn't, I think, had time to gestate. So personally, I think that's going to be a great thing over the next, say, 5 years. I'm not sure, I'm just guessing. But I don't think we've had time to see it work yet. Does your committee have any thoughts on that, or am I missing something?
No, and I think that's exactly what we're kind of talking about here is, you know, are there those other strategies for increasing both housing stock and housing that might be more affordable? And we did, you know, I know that the Planning Commission had done some work this past year on increasing some of those allowances. And, you know, as the Housing Committee, we did come out and support those. So I think those are definitely valid strategies, right? And I think looking at, right, what we looked at here, this particular project was more of those larger developments. Like, what is possible? We wanted to kind of like answer that question, make that checkbox, and say, okay, where else do we want to spend our time to focus on, and what are some other strategies that we could help implement? So I think that's definitely part of a viable strategy, right?
Okay, Mark, just a follow-up question. I think mortgage rates right now are kind of prohibitive. I'm sure that's at least some of the friction that we're feeling in getting this moving towards affordable housing. So I don't know what anybody can do about that. I'm pretty sure the town's not in a position to subsidize mortgages. I don't think. I wouldn't even consider it myself. But the Village Residential South across the bridge, which is part of the Far Farm property, that's another really promising area for affordable housing development. In fact, I think Gary Bresser is building a house there right off of Cochran Road. It's a perfect location. They can walk anywhere they want. So I think we've got some momentum that way. And I think your housing committee and the planning commission too, and Keith's help are starting to pay off. I think it's more of a slow rolling, rollout just because of various market conditions. But I think we're headed there, and you've got your thumb on the pulse there.
Jay Bard Hill. First, Mark, I'd like to thank you for putting this together and members of the committee. One, I want to correct what I think might have been a semantic error when you were describing mobile home parks as being lower density. I think you meant they were higher density, did you not?
No, you can't build on top of each other. So you can
that's
have
true.
less land to build up. That's why he was saying that. I don't mean to speak for Mark, but
I thought you could stack them there.
yeah. So it's high density in the sense of you could have mobile home parks very close to each other, but it's the fact that you can go stories high.
Yeah,
I appreciate the point. So
they're not. They still have their own, a parcel. It's one dwelling per parcel, right? They're generally closer together, but we don't have a duplex, triplex, something along those lines, right? On that similar parcel.
Yeah, the metric I'm thinking of is how many people live on that per acre, or how many separate family dwelling units are there per acre. And I would assert that tends to be more dense, not less dense, even though they are tending to be single story.
No, actually, the density is about 2.2 dwelling units per acre on that whole parcel. If you add in the whole parcel, that's what the density currently is there, which is pretty low.
Including all the vacant area. But if I just walk up the street and I say, how many houses are in the acres that are covered by mobile homes? I think it's significantly higher than that number is my point.
Yeah, we don't do density like that. It's per parcel, so.
I understand that, but for the average citizen thinking, where am I going to live? And 10 feet in that direction is a house, and 10 feet in that direction is a house, and 10 feet in the other direction is a house. It feels more dense to that person, right? So that's my question about density. So just clear about what we mean. The other, I was just contemplating what we mean, and I think perhaps we have an ambitious view of the select board acting independently about the item like number 4. So the ways we might consider creating incentives for affordable housing are typically either zoning or tax structure, right? Aren't those the prime methods we have?
Can you repeat what you just said?
The main tools we have to create incentives for things like affordable housing are tax structure and zoning. Like
As a select board.
Well, as a town, yeah. But I'm just going to say that part of my point is the select board doesn't actually directly control zoning. It starts with the planning commission and then comes here. Yeah. So just, I think people sometimes think the select board does everything and is responsible for everything, and it's not entirely true.
Well, it does come right there.
And then we talked about creating systems to identify and methods of identifying and purchasing land. Some of us will remember the history of the conservation fund in our town. What's the current value of the conservation fund?
$200,000
No, per year.
Depending on the tax rate, what the
My real point is, it wasn't just a select board decision, oh, let's fund the conservation fund, so it goes out to the taxpayers, vote on it, and so typically when we think we're gonna set aside funds to do something, it either is part of a budget conversation, or we sometimes defer to a vote of the voters to say, do you want to create a bond fund or incentives off on the side that would then be available to do X? Cool. And it would seem to me, it's similar to our relationship with other committees, it might be helpful to get like more specific proposals about what that might look like. What would you want the town to do in terms of how much money construed how over what period of time to accomplish what? That's just a couple of thoughts on how we might move this forward in a sort of actionable way. I don't know if that's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bart. Jeff?
That's a really good point. I would, rather than make a decision, make a decision to allocate money towards any particular purpose, or we do that in a lot of different things, fire truck and whatever. But in this case, this is kind of a special purpose. I think it's a very good point. And I think people would have to come to us with that idea rather than us put it out, I think. I did have a clarifying question. On the Riverview Commons slide, you mentioned that the current zoning allows for 4 units per acre for mobile home sites. The density is currently at 1.4, and with the additional 65 to 85 units, it would be 2.2. If I'm reading the slide correctly, but you say that it needs a zoning change to 5 units per acre. Why? But the math doesn't add up to me. I don't get it.
Virginia, would you like to comment
Yes.
on that one?
Yeah,
Our
I've got
expert
to
here.
Get the photos of the people here off the part where it says that. Hold on just a second.
So it's got, I think it's got 145 units now,
Or yeah, 100.
something like that, on 108 acres. And so it's well under, it's 1.4, right? It'd be the 1.4 units per acre right now. If you add 65 to 85, I'm assuming that comes out to about 2.2. That's about right. And then so why does a zoning change to 5 units per acre? And why would that be necessary?
Well, the new Act 47 does require 5 units per acre, but it's only in areas that are served by municipal water and sewer. So it's probably not correct that this has to change to 5 units per acre. That would only be in areas which are served by municipal water and sewer. So if it's currently 4 units per acre, yeah, then I guess the 2.2 units per acre would still be,
you know, I would also,
adequate.
if you did 5 units per acre and you put 500 units out there, it would be, I don't know, I can't imagine their septic capacity would be anywhere near that.
Yeah, well, they do claim that they have enough septic for their increased capacity, but they're not contemplating putting multi-unit housings, which would be actually something that increased the density to beyond what is currently allowed. So if they're not going to put any multifamily units, which is what the housing consultant recommended to use that land efficiently, then they might be able to come in under the current zoning.
That's how it would get denser, because they'd be able to go up.
Yeah, if you put multifamily units, you know, a 20-unit building, then you would achieve a greater density. So
that's helpful. Thank you.
Jay, there's a question in the audience here in the room.
Okay. Aaron, can you show me the audience? Thank you. Okay. Go ahead, Garrett.
Thank you for putting this all together. I do have a couple of questions for you. where you were talking, Jay, that's why I should repeat about the permitting process. Like, I know the state of Vermont is forcing us to do it's encouraging us to do the ADUs, the accessory dwelling units. And I know the town of Richmond has changed some zoning through the planning commission to help entice that, or to help encourage that. One of the things that you have the ability to do too is waive the fees, Bard. Is if you want to encourage, rather than the taxpayer have to come in and put forth money toward projects, you could actually waive the fees for anybody who wanted to put an accessory dwelling either in a garage, in their actual home, or any of those kinds of things. So that would be an immediate turnaround that you could post and do and encourage that. Because if we're talking about a 20 unit project that somebody wants to come in and own, I prefer not a affordable housing owner. I prefer owners, like the homeowner owning the accessory dwelling, or people coming in and putting in affordable housing. I'd like to ask, did you do an inventory and do you have a definition of affordable single family housing?
So did we do an inventory of what housing in Richmond is currently considered affordable?
Correct, of single family.
So generally, the definition of affordable housing is 30% no more than 30% of one's income, family income, household income, is put towards the expense of housing. So that includes the mortgage, the taxes, etc. So I don't believe we have an inventory of looking at everyone's income and matching that up to their housing expense.
I guess what I'm saying is, because you can't determine that, right? I'm actually saying you all as a committee establish what you would define as an affordable single family home in the town of Richmond. Is it $200,000? Is it $400,000? What do you define as an affordable single family home, and do an inventory so we have an idea? Because maybe we aren't going to have some developer come in, because you've seen almost every single one of your parcels that you considered. Nobody wants affordable housing projects. They don't want to come in and do an affordable housing project unless the town's going to help pay for it. The only one that really is willing to and has been willing to for the past 10 years is the mobile home park. And I worked for the mobile home park and worked with the water and sewer group to try to expand the water and sewer out there. And the mobile home park owner pulled out of that project because the town of Richmond did not want to say that they would allow, and that we could tie it to the permitting of those extra affordable units that he's looking for, which was like 65. It was 65 at the time. I don't know if the 85 came in with the 5 per acre that Jeff was talking about, but it was 65 units that he was looking to put out there. So if you're really looking to do something, that was a property owner who was willing to do something with the town of Richmond. But I really would like to see the select board possibly encourage the waiving of the permit fee for accessory dwelling units, to see if we can immediately start to pick up some units within our community right away. And I would like to see an inventory of homes below a certain value in Richmond and how many of them we have, because I think that's important as well.
So I could speak a little bit to that, Kara. I mean, that's one of the things that has been suggested that we might do for our next step, since the traditional affordable housing projects don't seem to be very feasible at the moment here. One of the things is to try to understand how to make housing that is more affordable and isn't affordable. Affordable housing has this definition with HUD. It has to be there has to be a certain income level below which there are a lot of rules about what actually constitutes affordable housing. So we're suggesting that maybe what we want to do is more like, think about how can we make housing that's just more affordable to people. And this is part of the goal that the Planning Commission has had of removing some of the barriers so that you can have 3 and 4 unit buildings, you can have duplexes, you can have ADUs, you can, and maybe it's possible, although with the size of this committee, we have a limited number of things that are possible for us to achieve. One of the things would be to try to figure out how to make all these different kinds of housing more affordable. Single family houses in general aren't the most affordable type of housing. Multifamily housing is more affordable overall because it's cheaper to create. So I think, part of what you're suggesting is a place we could go from here if we, want to finish this phase of the work, which is looking at traditional affordable housing that is labeled affordable housing. So
I'm just not a big proponent of chicken coop living, honestly. I don't like to have multi-stacked high units of affordable housing that people end up, I can say they used in the big cities, they used to put everybody in some housing project and then walk away. And it wasn't maintained, it wasn't taken care of, it wasn't safe. I would rather see accessory dwelling units than encourage some big housing project of some affordable housing group to come into Richmond and create a project. We have a project. We've had an affordable housing project in Richmond that the history of it was there was supposed to be a return of some of the funds that Richmond had a grant for. And if we had stayed on top of that and received those monies, we could have reinvested those monies was $300,000 and we could have 200,000. Sorry. Thank you, David, for might be up to 3 by now.
Interest.
Yeah, before interest. So it would have been money that could have been reinvested in more affordable housing projects rather than staying with the one it was with. Because the select board passed on collecting the funds and deferred and deferred and deferred. And it might be deferred for, I don't know how long. If
About
anybody,
1,000,000 years.
no, but there's a realistic number. And my point is, if you're really looking down the road, maybe it's 10 years from now. If we knew that answer, there'd be $200,000 to reinvest into more affordable housing. So thank you. I don't mean to have a big speech, but I would rather see accessory dwelling units because I think they will be maintained and taken care of and more welcome in the communities. Along with check with a mobile home park.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from anybody in the Zoom, on the select board, and the audience?
Jay, this is Connie.
Go ahead, Connie.
Thank you. Mark, would you put up that last slide again if it's convenient?
Sure, I can do that.
I'm testing out an impression I'm getting from the select board, and I don't mean to put people on the spot, but it's good to have clarity when you're trying to do work that you've been kind of chartered to do. Go back to the last one, if you could, as in the last one in the slide deck. And that is when number 4, which is discuss serious commitment by town, that one, which also came out of the Brandy Saxton proposal, is I sort of, Lisa and Bard, when I listened to your conversation, it sounds like you would prefer doing the, reaching the goals of the state in terms of affordable housing in a kind of gradual and natural way, with property owners leading the way as it best serves their own personal, family, or commercial needs, to gentle infill or find places where, might not be in the center of town, but there might be other places like Riverside to try to squeeze in some more housing. And the question here is that I have is the select board interested in being an active agent in increasing affordable housing? So this is a put you on the spot kind of question, because I had a conversation with Jay a couple months ago, because there was a piece of property right in the center of town that was suddenly for sale. And I knew Jay had been working on the ARPA committee. And I said, Jay, there's this piece of property for sale. It could be really cool as affordable housing. It doesn't matter what it is. But by the time Jay had gotten back to me saying, why? How would we do that? How much does it cost? What the heck would we do? Not exactly like that, Jay, but something along the, so what would the next step be? which I do not have the answer for, it was already under contract. So it wasn't like it was a hugely lost opportunity, but it made me realize that even if we had an opportunity to create a place where affordable housing could be an opportunity for this community, we don't have a way of actually making it happen other than an individual property owner deciding that they're really excited about affordable housing, which so far nobody has been. So hard to not asking for a motion or anything like that, but does this select board want to take an active role, or is it really better to sort of wait and see how property owners make it happen themselves?
Okay, well, this is Jay. Hold on, I get to go. She commented on me. Connie, you make a good point in that I don't think I hope I didn't sound quite as baffled as you came across, but the problem is land around here closes very, very quickly. This is not the only piece of property that someone came to me and said, what if we did this? There was a piece down in Jonesville, down Duxbury Road, that looked very promising. And while we were trying to find out how much it would be, because it would have been a great opportunity for parking and river access, it was under contract before we could get our shoes on. That does tend to be the problem right now. Pieces of land don't sit around vacant. They seem to get closed on very quickly. What I've seen in other areas, and I think this was referred to at some point tonight, was the idea of tax breaks. You build an affordable housing unit and you get X% off your property taxes for the first 5 years. That would be something that, you know, it seems to me that kind of approach would be a net win, because if it's a vacant piece of property or piece of property that doesn't have something on it, the grand list value is going to be X. You put something on it, grand list value is now greater. Now, if you're forgiving some of the taxes, you're not getting as much, but you're also getting the societal good of having more housing. That's the kind of thing I'd be interested in exploring, but we'd have to get some feedback from VLCT about the legal framework of doing that kind of thing. I would like to see us take a role where a role can be taken, but in terms of like snapping up pieces of property as soon as they come on the market, I think that's going to be one that's going to, at least for the time being, be outside our reach. Bart, I saw you had your hand up. And Lisa, go ahead, either one.
Thank you. Connie, a question back to you. Maybe you don't have the answer, but what would help me the most would be to know what current dwellings there are in town that would qualify for what we're looking for. So I can look at them and understand, you know, the mental picture that I need to have to see things that aren't there. There are houses here, I'm sure, that qualify as affordable housing. They maybe weren't, maybe weren't built for that purpose or with that in mind, but they may well meet the definition. And I don't know what they are. So if I knew what those were, I could kind of educate myself on what I'm looking for. And maybe I would see things that aren't there yet that could be there, and be able to answer some of your other hypotheses about what we could do to stimulate it. So is that something, or Virginia, maybe that's, or Mark, whoever's running the show for you guys, does that fit what your goal is? Would that be something you'd be able to accomplish?
I don't know, Mark, is that data, are we going to be able to find that kind of data? You know, in our demographic survey work, we have to work with data. Maybe Keith knows the answer to this, but I don't know that there's data that is going to reveal this fact to us. Mark, do you know?
That's a tough question. Yeah, maybe planning is where we start instead of buying properties. I'm not sure. I'm just throwing it out for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, we can't go door to door and say, you know, okay, what's your mortgage and your utilities and how much do you make? And so we can only depend on the data that exists, that is gathered, and there's a good amount of data that's gathered by various entities. But I'm not sure that is going to be revealed. Okay.
So one comment on that, and this is part specific to that. It seems to me, without a whole lot of work, but some, you take what are the property values and say, and make an assumption about mortgage and taxes, and what would somebody have to earn, or what would family income have to be to pay for all that?
Kind of work it backwards.
And I'm just gonna observe, not much is gonna be affordable outside of mobile home park.
That's my
And
sense.
some of the most marginal housing
Right.
in our town. I used to live on the affordable street, and all the old, like, beat up houses have been knocked down and replaced with $500,000 houses.
Except yours.
So, except mine.
Just waiting for that to happen.
It'll happen, it's just when.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this incrementalism, that was actually the point of my conversation before. Anytime somebody comes to us and buy this piece of land next week, the answer is gonna be, I got no means of doing that. It's not budgeted. So that was my point of specifically raising the conservation fund idea. That what you do is you raise funds for this purpose. Like, you wanna spend $1 million buying a piece of land, then you better start putting money aside in order to fund the purchase of that land. So that's identifying and purchasing land.
Now, Forrest,
I would say you just gotta translate that into consider building a fund that would allow the purchase of land for the purpose of affordable housing. Because by the time you've identified it, you don't have the money. It's like trying to buy a house in Richmond when you're not pre-approved for a mortgage. It ain't gonna happen. It will have been sold. And then my other point is to be specific about incentivize is a word that doesn't mean anything to me. I think we have to operationally define it to be, what do we mean? Do we mean permit fees for ADU? Do we mean permit fees for affordable housing needing a certain definition? Do we mean tax reductions for certain types of housing or certain types of residents? I mean, that's what I'm like, because this general stuff, and I will appreciate the work of housing committees, but I'll observe for the select board, I think is one of, I don't know, let's call it 30 agenda topics.
Yeah, right.
So we're not, I don't think any of us are going to be spending 20 hours this month on affordable housing. So that's sort of the challenge from this, that we are to a large degree better responding, asking for specific proposals and responding to them than we are at coming up with specific proposals as a select board. And I say that just as one member of the select board.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay. I do not see any hand. Oh, we have a hand up.
Yeah,
Oh,
Jay?
go ahead, Josh. Jeff, go ahead.
Too many J's in this room. I agree with Bard that it's difficult for us to come up with the idea. It is more typical that we respond to ideas. And I think these are intriguing, you know, that I'd like to think more about setting up an affordable housing fund. I think it's also challenging to think of us being a landlord or, you know, a developer. You know, we don't really have the capacity, the staff capacity to do that. That's why, and I think I applaud you for doing it, that you approach Champlain Housing Trust and what was the other one? Cathedral Square. This is what they do. And it's very complicated to do it. It's like super complicated, and they're able to pull in all kinds of money resources that we wouldn't even begin to be able to contemplate. So I applaud you for doing that. I would point, as far as a data source, the community data profile that was in the town plan. It's a spreadsheet that talks about housing cost as a percentage of household income. And I'm sure it's dated now, but that data came from somewhere. And we did just have a census 2 years ago where they did knock on every door and they did come up with that kind of information. So I think that kind of information does exist. However, I suspect Bart is correct that, you know, there's not a lot of affordable houses in Richmond anymore. So it's just two observations.
Can I give you something? The Center for Rural Development operates out of University of Vermont, and they're the ones that consolidated that information and made it available for the town plan. So they have a lot of that data on an ongoing basis. It's always updated, but it's through UVM.
There you go.
Okay, Patty?
Yeah, I think this has been a really good conversation, and I think there are things that I think are underlying a lot of the conversation. In the presentation, we heard about 4 options, 3 of which were owned by private people, and they were thrown out because the owner wasn't interested in having affordable housing on the property. A 4th property, Brown's Court, is owned by the town. There isn't any, you don't have to have a bunch of money in a conservation place to buy the land. We own the land, and neighbors are not excited about it. I think you would find neighbors, as Kara was saying, I think there are neighbors anywhere. It seems to be the issue is there is a perception of affordable housing as being sort of the projects in New York City, and that we all kind of grew up seeing, like in the 60s and 70s or whatever. And I think that we do have a property. The town could, I know politically it might be difficult with, if there's neighbor opposition, but potentially the neighbors, could be pulled together with Champlain Housing to find out what people's fears and concerns are. And those things might be able to be addressed. And maybe we don't do a ton of housing back there, but maybe there could be some place of compromise there, so that Richmond, it's such a perfect location with the septic and availability of town resources and so forth. But maybe we could work with them, since we own the land, to come up with something that would be tenable for people. That is the piece of land that we do own, and we do have control over it as a town. And, potentially, the people in Richmond need to get surveyed a little bit about this, about how they would feel about that. But I think anytime you want to make a change in the way people live, anywhere, where anybody lives, if there's going to be a change, people aren't going to like it. And they need to be helped through and be part of that process. So I think we should look at Brown's Court. It's not really being utilized terrifically well at this point. And we could really do a wonderful thing by providing housing there. So I think we need to kind of circle back around and go, we own property. We hear people's concerns. I think people have a lot of fear about change as well as affordable housing, and maybe we can have some community forums or something, but I don't know. I think we have a potential site. So it's not necessarily about money. It's really about people's fears, I think, is the bigger thing here.
Well, an additional factor, if I might, Jay, is that in the work to increase the density of housing in the municipal water and sewer served areas, we also need to balance that with quality of life concerns and open space concerns. We are increasing the density significantly in the village, so we're going to have open space. It's not just that the neighbors are opposed to it, but there are reasons to preserve that piece of open land, because it's one of our very few open spaces, public green spaces in the village. So I don't think it's just about people's fears, Patty. I really think it's about, are we also committed to having some open space, some green space? So, that was a conclusion that we came to after looking at that piece of land for a while. I think it's also interesting that, there's this ARPA money committee that's set up to add recreational uses there. So we're sort of working in our silos here. But I don't think we want to give up on the idea that we need open space. It's like the Farr farm to the south of us. what an amazing amenity that is to have a tiny farm right next to the village with the sunflower stroll and the eggs. And, you know, I think it's a valid and legitimate concern to not be willing to sacrifice that. I know we need housing, but we also want to balance it with some open space concerns. So that was one of the issues that came up with that particular parcel.
Okay, if I could, Virginia, thank you for bringing that up. The Volunteers Green is what would make gentle infill in the village actually workable, rather than a really dense pile of housing. The Volunteers Green is a consolidated, huge open space that those people can access with maybe about 50 or 60 footsteps. And that's where kids can play. They can get their baseball bats out and so forth. They don't have to have a yard for it. That's the only way that infill in the village actually works, is by having that green space right there. And you're exactly right. It's very valuable. So thank you.
Hey, I want to thank the Housing Committee for your work. I wish that we could say, based on what you've said, here is the following magic bullet we're going to fire to make this all happen. But there's a lot to think about. And I don't know what our next step forward would be, but as a couple of members of the select board said, if a particular proposal saying we think you should do this specific thing is brought before us, that's something that I know I would be very receptive to. I don't fully understand the whole system of federal and Vermont tax credits for affordable housing and so forth, but that's just one example of things where if more specifics are brought to us, something possibly could happen. I wish I had something more to say, something more hopeful to say than that, but that seems to be kind of where we stand.
So if I could make a comment, just a last comment. So the Housing Committee was formed by the Select Board to address the affordable housing question. So we feel that with this report, we have taken the traditional affordable housing concept as pretty much as far as we can take it. So we would just like, this is why we're doing this report at this time, because we want to know from the Select Board if you have any other particular goals. We have a whole set of goals. It's in your packet. You know, we have short-term goals, long-term goals. We want them to be achievable goals by us. And we don't think that this particular direction is an achievable goal for us. So we will continue to do the other things that we do with the demographics and the metrics and the support of gentle infill and missing middle housing and, you know, all those other things that we feel we can do. But we really feel that this is kind of an end point for us in terms of looking at traditional affordable housing in our area that just doesn't seem to lend itself to that concept. So I don't know if you all have anything else you would like to say about this, or, you know, if we're obviously continuing to work on outreach to encourage people to be more accepting of denser housing in the water and sewer area, which is the efficient way to make housing. But we're interested in, you know, what your commitment is to affordable housing. Are you, you know, where would you, is there anywhere you would like us to go, particularly since this seems to be kind of the end point for this project?
Members of the Select Board, Chief, would you like to, Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you. Virginia, you know, I keep thinking about this. We're trying to look for the magic, you know, wand essentially, and I guess there isn't one. And what I think would help us the most is to define not what we're looking for in terms of affordable housing, but define what that consists of. Where has it worked elsewhere? How many square feet are these? I know a lot of this has gone into the zoning amendments that the Planning Commission has worked on, and we are putting into force. But beyond that, the zoning revisions and the accompanying language doesn't really have any metrics in it. And I guess I'm kind of a data-driven person, so that's still something that I don't think I know is on paper, what does affordable housing actually look like? And I don't think the state defines it either. They can't because it's different for every area. But we're only talking about Richmond, and I think we can get some data to look for that maybe doesn't exist yet. But if it did, what would it look like? That's kind of what I would like to have you guys, if that's possible, as your charter ends here.
So one thing that we need to be clear about is the difference between affordable housing that is traditionally that meets the HUD goals of not more than 30% of your income, et cetera, et cetera. That is traditional affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Then there is the question of housing that is more affordable to people. In other words, more people who don't meet the criteria for living in affordable housing that more people can afford. I would like us to be clear when we talk about it, which of those two things that we're talking about. So it sounds to me like you're not talking about affordable housing as it is defined.
Exactly.
You are talking about housing that is more affordable to people, which we have some ideas of. You know, we know that multifamily housing is more affordable because it's cheaper to build. It's less desirable. There's less land associated with it, whatever you want to call it, you know, condos springing up all over. So I don't know exactly what it is that you're suggesting that we look for, whether there are metrics about that. You know, it is different in every community, affording that's more housing that's more affordable to people as opposed to traditional affordable housing, for which there are very exact metrics. You know, there are very exact parameters that make something into affordable housing. And that is what we feel that we have kind of come to the end of the road.
Yeah, right. Exactly. In Richmond, you're right. In Richmond, affordable housing isn't the same as it is in Shelburne or in Colchester or whatever. It's because of Richmond, the Richmond environment, the Richmond location is unlike anyone else because here we are. And that's part of the formula. And I don't know what the other parts are because they're Richmond specific qualities, I think. And if we can somehow define that or capture what those are, and that's about as much as I know at this point.
So you're talking about housing that is more affordable to people, but is not meeting the definition of affordable housing, correct?
We'll bring people in, and I think our initial goal should be to bring people in. I mean, town is not growing, it's actually shrinking. So it's either going to disappear or we're going to grow. So that would be the best thing for us to have.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
One last comment, I think. It seems to me that there are two steps that you can take from this point going forward. One is zoning. You know, it seems to be the next opportunity for us to make any decisions relative to density, which is a big part of your report, will be in your zoning document, and your zoning document is going to be, I recognize it's going to be quite challenging, but you know, I think that is a decision point for us. The other thing is kind of what Bard was suggesting. I think there is some receptivity on the board if you presented us with a proposal for us to consider, we would consider it. Can't say we would do it, but we would consider it. Whether it's for affordable housing or housing that's more affordable, I don't know. Whether it's setting up a fund to help offset some costs of, you know, water sewer hookup, you know, might be something, you know, more than just permitting. I don't even know how much permitting is. It's, you know, a few hundred, you know, $1,000 or something. I'm not sure offsetting that cost is going to be the make or break any developer for making a decision. But it works better for us if we respond to a proposal. Then we don't really have the time to create a proposal in this format.
Jay,
Kara, go ahead.
The fund, please realize, if you're going to set up a fund and make taxpayers pay, you're making the more affordable houses that are just barely affordable have to pay taxes to set aside money for other people. So just realize when you create funds, you're really taxing people who are just barely living in an affordable. So that's one heads up. The other thing is, are we not pursuing the one developer in this town that has the land and the means and the septic capacity to immediately go through, encouraging them to go through a permit process, et cetera, because we have a bias against mobile homes? I mean, 65 units is what percentage of those 1,250 units that they're looking for in Chittenden County? If you don't think the state of Vermont and other funding sources would be available for those units, then you've got something right in front of you and you're making this committee go search somewhere else when you've got somebody who said, yes, I'd consider it. And he already has the plan. That's my point.
That landowner has, that landowner has the final word, and that landowner has rebuffed the efforts by the town, as far as I know.
No, I don't. I think they just said, no, he's still interested, but the town didn't want. The town didn't want to work with them. They didn't want more mobile homes.
Why didn't they build them?
Tyler Masha has his hand up. Tyler, go ahead.
Hey, I can speak a little bit briefly to the actual permitting costs. So, and typically we charge for new home construction. For single family homes, it's 40 cents a square foot. There's also for new homes a fire impact fee, and that would also be for like ADUs as well, of $218.70. Don't ask me why it's that. It's some weird formula that the fire department has to use. For multifamily, it's a little less. Off the top of my head, it's like 151 or so, give or take, per unit. So typically for off the top of my head, ballparking, usually for most homes, you're looking at, call it between $1,000, $1,400. Some are a little less, some are more, in change in permitting fees. There is also a fee for the certificate of occupancy. That's pretty minimal. That comes out to be roughly $50, $25 for the permit, $15 for the recording, and you have to collect another $15 for the state for the RBES, which is the building energy efficiency stuff. So it's not tens of thousands typically. I mean, the Creamery, this one was more expensive, obviously, because they were doing multiple units of housing. But in terms of for the individual homeowner, you're looking at roughly between $1,000, $1,400, give or take, in permitting fees, plus fire impact.
Thank you, Tyler.
Okay. So we have a number of other agenda items. I hate to call an end to this discussion for now, but as several people have said, if we can get some very specific proposals brought to us, we would certainly give them a good hearing and adopt them if we can. Our next item on the agenda is one that's going to be near and dear to a lot of people's hearts. It has to do with our speed bumps on Cochran Road. And I am probably the only person in town who has not seen them because they were installed before I left town for this trip, although my wife has sent me pictures. There have been a lot of comments regarding them. You've all probably seen them in Front Porch Forum. One item that has been mentioned was the fear that they might be delaying Richmond Rescue in their response time. We do have a response from Michael Chiarella. He said that speed bumps might add 10 to 15 seconds, that in terms of the overall response time and calls, there are many factors that affect response time, and 10 to 15 seconds could be happening because of things like trains, potholes, bad weather, traffic. 10 to 15 seconds from speed bumps is not drastically affecting the equation. And he concluded by saying speed bumps are a reasonable and helpful tool to keep residential traffic speeds reasonable. So I just wanted to mention that because that is something a lot of people had speculated, that this would be a matter of life or death with Richmond Rescue responding to calls. We are the speed bumps that we have in place are removable and they will be taken out for winter because otherwise the plows would probably ruin them. And we will be evaluating how they worked as part of a larger study of Cochran Road. We do have a Cochran Road scoping and feasibility study that's looking at the middle segment outside those 25-mile-an-hour zones, but a more detailed scoping study will be performed on the western and eastern ends and evaluate and recommend traffic calming measures. Translated into plain English, that means we're looking at it. We don't want to just start putting in speed tables every which way because we don't know what we don't know. However, we do have an expert from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission with us tonight, Bryan Davis, who, Bryan, I believe you're prepared to speak to this issue.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'm here to answer questions as well as provide some of the background of how we got to where we are today, which I'll do now. Thanks to those of you who previously participated in development of the Richmond Walk Bike Trails Plan. That was completed, I believe, about a year ago now. Part of that plan looked at some different concepts for Cochran Road, which was one of the top areas identified through that plan process from residents. So there are some different ideas there. The town was interested in looking at those quickly. We had hoped to use the existing consultant for that walk bike trails plan to do sort of a deeper dive on Cochran Road in particular. This past spring, due to some staffing changes there was a little bit of a delay in that, but in talking with Josh and others in the town, we realized we could sort of do, instead of doing that full corridor study that Jay just mentioned, we could more quickly respond to resident concerns about speeding on the western end of Cochran Road through some different traffic calming measures, including the placement of the speed feedback signs that sort of show you how fast you're traveling in that area, as well as some vertical traffic calming features, such as what the town chose to install. Coming up in this fiscal year, which we're now into, we will begin that larger study of the entire corridor. In the longer middle section, we're doing what's called a corridor study there, which are looking at some different higher level conceptual alternatives rather than getting into some specific recommendations. However, for the eastern and western ends of those, we're going to be doing what we call a scoping study on those two ends. So we will come up with, by developing a range of alternatives and along with the project committee and the town's assistance, come up with a preferred alternative for traffic calming on those two ends, as well as some future recommendations for the middle section. I did go out there and check out the speed bumps over the weekend just to better understand what the town was talking about. I had in my head what was recommended by the consultant as temporary speed humps. The temporary speed humps are typically longer in width. They're usually 7 to 14 feet long direction of travel. It seems like the ones that are on the ground there are maybe around 2 feet or so. To me, those fall into the speed bump kind of a category, shorter in length, higher in height. Again, those are temporary. It's what the town got to respond to those residents' concerns quickly. Part of the study will come up with some more detail about what those recommendations are. So there's vertical deflection for traffic calming, such as what you have out there, or something, as people have talked about, speed humps, which are a little bit longer. There's also speed lumps, also known as traffic cushions, which provide, it's not just a consistent height across, there's gaps in between that fit the width of emergency vehicles so that they are not impacted in the direction of travel. With that type of thing, of course, people driving regular vehicles can adjust their driving pattern so that only one side of their vehicle is impacted by the humps. Other things that we'll consider are the impact of striping. If you stripe a fog line, the white line on the shoulder, it changes our perception as drivers of how wide the travel lane is. So those are different things that we can look at on how to address resident concerns. So I'll pause there. happy to respond to questions if possible, or provide a little bit more detail about our process.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Lisa, go ahead.
Brian, what data is being collected with the placement of these, if any? Is there any kind of observation being made or?
Yep, we our team put down some of those traffic counters earlier this summer. I believe it was in June, to capture some of that before data, and then they're going to go back out later this month and put those tubes down again. So we'll have some after data that will not only inform sort of what's happening now, but will be part of that longer corridor study as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Art?
Brian, first, thanks for coming. Thanks for that very quick explanation also. I bring this up with some trepidation, but it's hard to avoid the eventual topic of speed limits. So maybe speak briefly about speed limits. A couple of people have observed one of the challenges is the transition from 45 to 25. So maybe any comments you have about speed studies and speed limits might be relevant as well.
Yep. Looking at those speed issues, that's something that we can do either as staff. We've previously provided some guidance to the town on what can and can't be done under state statute, and what sort of makes good professional and engineering sense on that transitional staging of speed limits. This upcoming study that my colleague Jason will be working on with the town will also provide some recommendations on that as well.
Okay. Jeff, you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question? I guess not. Are there any hands up in the audience?
Not in the room.
Okay. Any questions? Any hands? I don't see any hands up in the Zoom. Okay. Josh, is there anything you wanted to share before we move on?
No, but now we do have a hand up in the Zoom, Jeannie Adams.
Oh, by all means, Jeannie, go ahead.
So I guess I'm wondering if they're temporary speed bumps, when will they be removed? Will we go through the whole fall with them?
November, right?
Yeah, I don't think we have an exact date, but certainly before the snow flies so that we can plow.
And that's typically end of October, early November.
I'd say somewhere around there generally.
I'd be interested in some information showing what the average speed is now that they're in, and then when they're gone as well. Are people slowing down now that they're removed? And how will the Bridge Street, Cochran, Heinsberg Road intersection changes impact the 25 zone?
Thank you for that. I did capture that comment.
This is
Thank you.
I don't think we have a plan or a proposal. The transportation committee has been looking at that, and that's part of a study of what does that intersection look like. So that plan, which we have yet to see, or proposals or options that we have yet to see, I don't know yet, since we don't have those in front of us, what its intended or actual impact might have on speeds of vehicles entering Cochran Road. But it's a reasonable question for us to ask as that comes forth.
So I do have, come to think of it, Jay,
Go
I
ahead,
do have
Jeff.
a question, and maybe for Brian,
Okay.
I'm not sure. So we came up with this idea of putting those speed bumps in a year ago. It was like last fall, I think, when we came up with it in a select board meeting and then found out that we needed to go through a study in order to place them. And it's taken until it was August, I think, when we finally got them installed. What might be the trajectory of when you come up with your study, so that I would think next year we're going to want to do something. I'm not sure what it's going to be. And your study would be informative of that. When do you think we could do that?
I think you would have results from this study by late spring, at least in draft form. That would be my expectation.
My hope would be that it might be earlier in spring and before the swim season. You know, what you may not be aware of is that a lot of traffic on Cochran Road happens, you know, when it's swimming season. There's a lot of recreational driving that happens, particularly on a hot summer day. So it would be great if we could have something in place before that happens, you know, so before the end of spring anyways. Just putting my marker in.
I will encourage Jason and the project team to work expeditiously.
Brian, Brian, I do have a question. Do you think, well, maybe you don't want to say, but do you think that the final design is going to be essentially a speed table or a hump or something that's been done a lot of times? In other words, it's pretty quick to put in, it's pretty easy to design, it's pretty straightforward to install. Does that sound reasonable? Does that sound possible?
Far be it for me to determine the outcome of a study that hasn't started yet.
Good answer. Okay. Didn't take the bait.
Okay. Jay, it's Bart. I wanted to add one thing to Jeff's description. It's kind of hard to picture right now. But last summer, I don't think we went a single select board meeting without residents of Cochran Road showing up and saying, what are you going to do about the people speeding there? The parking problems, the people back and forth. We got bikers, we got runners, we got people parking, we got people speeding. And for better and worse, the select board felt compelled to do something. And it was clear the combination of essentially non-existent police patrols. Many out-of-town drivers were motivated to go through that pathway quickly. Some discussions about dislocation of traffic from Route 2 to Cochran Road. And sort of weak and inadequate signage, especially the active signs. And people have different opinions about what works or what doesn't work. But I remember distinctly multiple residents of Cochran Road asking us to do something and specifically asking for speed tables as one specific concrete, like physical modification. So it's easy to ignore now because I don't know who's gone in the river lately, but I would encourage you not to. But there were many people going in the river every day last summer. There were times I was on the side of the river and in the space of 20 minutes, saw 20 or 30 people go by in a combination of inflatables, canoes, kayaks. There were cars all over the place. So it's a little hard to picture. I just want to remind people that was the environment that led us to take this unusual step of doing something without a more thorough, thoughtful study, for better and worse.
Okay.
Now
Okay, looks like there's a hand up.
No. Nope,
Oh,
we're good.
okay.
Moving.
Every so often I hear somebody say something that sounds like the word hand, and I'm like, wait, what? Okay. Our next item pertains to drainage, everybody's favorite topic. The residents of Esplanade and excuse me.
Sure.
The residents of Esplanade and Church Street have sent us a petition. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just,
No, keep it saying-
just saying Church Street, that's all.
Right, okay. I was in the wrong window. There is a swale that lies between Esplanade Street and the houses on the northern side of Esplanade Street and the southern side of Church Street. Basically a depression in the ground that collects stormwater. Because of our unusually high amount of rain this year, the ground can't absorb any more water. I've noticed this at my own house. I've got water coming into my basement that never came in before because the ground is just sodden. And so the question, the petition has asked us to remediate the water collecting there. They believe it is causing health hazards, including rats, mosquito infestations, and say there's evidence of raw sewage. And they've asked for immediate mitigation. which I'm sympathetic to. So various research has been done by our zoning officer, Tyler Mesha, and Pete Goslin. And Tyler, are you still with us on the call?
That I am.
Okay, Tyler, and rather than just repeating what you already told us, could you actually tell us what you told us?
Absolutely. So what makes this whole, and again, I'm sympathetic as well to the, to the people that are dealing with this along Esplanade. I wouldn't want a whole bunch of standing water, in that swale either. And to be fair, I mean, there was a news report the other day. We've received over in excess of 27 inches of rain so far this year. We're supposed to get more rain this week. So there really isn't anywhere else for that water to go. And I think in many ways, we've seen the results of that through the flash flooding that we had that really did more damage, I think, to Richmond than the initial round of flooding that we had on the earlier in July. What makes this whole issue particularly tricky is that this swale isn't a man-made piece of infrastructure as far as we can tell. It's not owned by the town. It's rather owned by each individual property owner where the swale kind of runs. The water also from, I have not witnessed this myself, but Josh and Pete have both witnessed, I didn't walk up as far as they did, that the water kind of runs down into there from Jericho Settlers Farm rather than kind of flowing from the swale through Jericho Settlers Farm. It kind of runs the opposite way. Where this gets challenging is that there really isn't a neat thing that the town can really do. We don't own the property, so it would be up to the individual property owners or owner, and whichever the case may be, who would decide to do this. All of that area is located in the Special Flood Hazard Overlay District, which makes it even more challenging to deal with from a permitting standpoint. That being said, there are two items that I think you could theoretically do. Is that you can do new drainage or channel management projects that requires conditional use approval by the Development Review Board. I would also have to get input from the state to see what conditions or what they would want to see on that, and they may come back and say we don't want you to do anything to it. There is also new bridges, culverts, docks, or other public projects which are functionally dependent on stream access or stream crossings. That also requires conditional use review. The tricky part for me would be to figure out what box does this really fall in. Is it a new bridge, culverts that is functionally dependent on stream access? Because there isn't really a stream back there. It's just a swale. So is it that, or is it new drainage or channel management projects when you're not really dealing with an active river per se that's back there, but it is dealing kind of with drainage, i.e. trying to get water to flow, away from the swale on Esplanade and into, the wet area that kind of runs behind Jericho Settlers Farm, Richmond Rescue, and then runs down into the Winooski River eventually down on that end. One thing that you 100% cannot do is do new fill. So you cannot fill in the swale or anything inside of the flood hazard overlay district. So that's just a no-go. So unfortunately, the only option that looks like you could really theoretically do would be drainage or channel management projects. But again, that would require the agreement of everybody who owns property along that swale, probably Jericho Settlers Farm. And it's not something I'm not an attorney, but I don't want to speak. I would be skeptical of the town's ability to force property owners to go through this particular type of project. So that's kind of where it sits. I'm happy to answer any questions that we have, but that's the best I have for you.
Okay, members of the audience, some of you look like, well, I'm looking at the names. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to ask questions of Tyler? Okay, members of the select board. Yep. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. You want to come up and introduce yourself? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Margot Austin, and I live at 139 Church Street and have lived there since the development was built in 2004. So just a couple clarifying things, Tyler. Thank you for your comments, but we're not looking to fill in the swale, so I don't know how that's not. But since we've lived there, including Irene, some of the history is this has never happened. I know we've gotten a lot more rainfall this year, but a couple things that are really important to say, and anyone else from our development can chime in, but we have a manhole cover that sits on our private property. That's part of the sewer system. On July 9th, that was erupting with raw sewage like you cannot believe into the swale. So where we're challenged is that this actually is, you have a right of way because sewage, we're on town water, we're on town sewer, there's right of ways. So even if this is a private property issue, this becomes a town issue because we have water as of 3 days ago. I just sent to Josh a video 3 days ago running in the direction of the town. So it's not going towards the farm, it's coming this way 3 days ago. So we have had standing water and running water since this issue. And so it clearly is not just a, oh, the water hasn't absorbed. We have moving water. So what we're requesting at this point is that the town has to be looking into this more actively. Again, there is a sewer system right in our backyard, which was erupting on July 7th, 8th during the flood. And so we had raw sewage just running into the swale. So important little notes. And during Irene, it was completely dry within 24 to 48 hours, dry. That's how fast the water was gone.
So Jay, as far, one thing that we kicked around and we had a short conversation and Josh mentioned this in the memo is putting, there are sealable sewer manhole covers that you put on top. So you can basically open them, but when you put them down and close them, it's sort of submarine hatchy, right? You put it down and stuff won't go in and won't go out from that manhole.
Oh, let's do that.
And that's something to contemplate. Steve from the water sewer system said he thought it was backing up from the field. Right. That it was backflowing from the field all the way up. So if you seal that, it will just keep going further up and pop up somewhere else. One of the things I've thought about since we last spoke was, is there a way to put like backflow checks in something as large as a sewage main? I don't know if that's even possible to prevent it from coming from the river back up the lane, back up the pipe. Yeah. So that might be as good an answer or better an answer than sealing the manhole covers. But I think those are two things that we contemplate from that systems perspective of what can we do, if anything, there. The other thing, when I walked it, I think on Sunday, it was clear to me, maybe it was Saturday, there was standing water at Jericho Farm. Like you walk across the field and there's like 3 inches deep here, 2 inches deep there. So it seemed pretty apparent the ground is saturated out there. I also walked from where the stormwater pipe outflow comes by Richmond Rescue and started to follow that down. I didn't follow it all the way to the river, but I went about 150 yards and it sure looked like it was going all the way to the river without turning back. So then the question, is there anything else we do to try to reduce stuff going in there from other places? It is very apparent, somebody who lives on Tilden Avenue during the heavy rainstorm, the hillside is flowing down. Like it literally was like a little waterfall going over the stone wall in our backyard. So pretty extenuating circumstances, but I'm going to observe it's probably not the last time. This is the first time since 2004. I'm not surprised if it happens again. So it seems to me, what do we do to reduce things like the possibility of wastewater infiltration? And that's like engaging, I think, with Steve, et cetera, about what can be done. And then are there other things that can be done that may or may not be town? Like we don't control the water coming off of the farmland, right? So if water is coming off the farmland instead and going into town as opposed to the other way to the river, is there anything that can be done? And whose job is it to do it? I don't have a clear answer on that. And what would it cost? I mean, they have to pay for it.
And how would we do it?
So those are, you know, sort of the questions, but it was very apparent to me when I walked it, there was a steady stream, even on a bright sunny day, coming off the farmland into that swale.
Okay, Jeff?
So later on in our agenda, we're going to talk about the Emergency Watershed Protection Program by the Natural Resources Conservation Service for a different stormwater problem on Tilden Avenue. And we're going to apply to them to be a sponsor to look into engineering solutions for that, as I understand that agenda item. Would it be possible to have more than one application to NRCS for storm? This appears to be an urgent problem. It's going to be difficult next week. We're expected to get a whole bunch more rain next week. But would it be possible? So anything that we do is not going to be immediate. But is there any way that we could use that program for this purpose? Does anybody know?
I don't think there's a limit on how many applicants you can put in. There is a deadline though of, I think it's September 7th. So,
It's 2 days.
but if the board, I mean, it's a simple enough form letter, really, that we could, if the board tonight wanted to authorize a letter to go in, I could draft that form letter and have Bart as vice chair sign it and you could get it in.
Sure, so
Circumstances are a little different.
they are, yeah, and
Yeah, it would have to be, but then they would determine if it qualifies. I mean, my understanding of that program is it's sort of an imminent threat to property, so water that's gonna come in. I mean, you could argue that there's, but it's not gonna flood into somebody's house from the swale, which is what I think they're looking for. But it doesn't hurt to ask. Maybe it did, okay.
We got some live reports.
So just observe, the Tilden property, the Tilden Avenue property is not in the floodplain.
Yeah.
Right. It is, and the water that's coming out is coming out from an historic town culvert. It's like, that's where it's coming from, right there, and has washed out the driveway, I think, 3 times in the last 2 years. So it's like the root cause, you don't have to go very far to figure out, oh, where all this water come from? It came from right there. Which is, and so I don't know what the eligibility for the program is, but it being outside of the floodplain and very directly associated with stormwater diversion through an established pipe specifically, and that is what is coming out from that pipe and no other obvious source, may or may not make a difference.
So I'm hoping these aren't mutually exclusive, that we could do. But what this program does, as I understand it, is that it's for private property, but you need a public sponsor, the town. It provides 75% of the cost of an improvement, of an engineered improvement, and I think it was 100% of the engineering costs. If you're eligible and accepted, which we may or may not be, but we wouldn't know unless we applied. And so, I would move that we apply for this emergency watershed protection program for this problem, this swale between Tilden, between Esplanade and Church Street.
We have nothing to lose, right?
We had nothing to lose to do that, and it's the best we can do. In the meantime, so I would make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
I don't think you need a motion. I think we just need to ask Josh to do it.
No,
However, Tyler just stuck his hand up, so he may have an input. Tyler?
Just one thing to bear in mind, and I'm not sure if this would have any impact on the project, but it sounds like, as was just being described, that the Tilden project is kind of dealing with a little bit more cut and dry, is where we have a piece of town infrastructure that's potentially putting water onto somebody else's driveway, knocking out the road. What makes this really complicated is that the swale area isn't a piece of infrastructure. It's a natural feature that's kind of there. Who knows when it was there? It's been there probably since everybody in this room has been alive, more or less. So to find the right vehicle to kind of, I don't know what they would look at, because it's like you would probably get approval from Jericho Settlers Farm to probably do anything to run it over there. I'm not saying not to, but it's just something to bear in mind. I just don't know what they would actually look at.
Tyler, I think those are all actual points, but I think it doesn't hurt to put a letter in. And then my understanding is the next step is they'll send a representative out to review the situation and determine if it's eligible. It doesn't have to necessarily be tied to town infrastructure. I think if you had a stream that was coming down and eroding a hillside to get into somebody's house, that would probably be eligible, even if it wasn't affiliated with the town. So I think it's worth submitting a letter and seeing what happens.
I think we do need a motion because it says that the eligibility that must be represented by a project sponsor.
Yeah, and the
And that would
town.
be us.
Yeah.
So I think we have to officially.
Agree on ourselves. I don't know if anybody saw the sand mound in Volunteers Green right after the flood. It had to be 3 feet high and nice sand. In fact, it just got spread out to be
Yeah,
a
right.
nice
Playground.
river wash. It really is. It's clean. I wonder if something like that happens downstream of you guys, and where that used to drain is now full of dirt. It looks okay because
In
it's
our yard,
just dirt.
it's not sand, it's, I
Silt.
think more clay and. silt.
Okay,
yeah.
silt, yeah. It's river bottom.
So it did
Okay,
bring
yeah.
clay up into your yard?
The whole yard.
Because when I walked the swale, it was pretty clay
If
surface.
you come through, and you're always welcome to come through our yard.
I don't know which one yours is exactly, but I walked on the Esplanade side and I fell because it was so slippery with clay. So I wonder if there's clay in there preventing it from raining like it normally
Yeah,
does.
it definitely.
Or it's just raise the elevation.
So if you go to our drive, so I'm Mary Bay. And I live at 62 Esplanade. So the swale, if you're starting on the Esplanade end near Bridge Street, begins there. So it goes along our driveway, which is where, and it comes right up to our basement window. And we've been lucky, it stops right there for the 2 major storms, but, and then it goes down through behind the roads. So, I think the concern that we've had is really that idea, don't be a dummy and fill it. We don't want to fill it. I really appreciate the conversation, and we're really looking for mitigation efforts. And I know it's hard, but we are living with the effects of that every day and really want to
The
pursue
sewer pipes
whatever
are a
happens.
slightly different problem, but it seems there should probably be some excavating that could be done. It might take a couple hours.
Yeah, it's only been a couple days that we've had no water. It really receded this weekend with the dry weather.
Good.
So we pulled out all the old garden stuff and, and we can probably start some excavating there. But it's really more about making the effort around the mitigation. We can take care of our yard.
Yeah, sure.
But the rats that the cats are bringing in and the sewage are the parts that aren't okay. It really
Yeah.
is. a health
So
hazard.
seeing as that the, the deadline's in 2 days, I think, just doing this and there's no harm in trying and maybe they'll, even if they deny us, they might have some suggestions on what we might do.
That would be the best part.
So if we put it in the form of motion, then there's a second activity, I think. Move to request federal assistance from the Natural Resources Conservation Service to address the flooding in the swale between Esplanade and Church Street.
Sounds good. I'll second that.
Okay, Josh, did you get that text?
I'm sure Duncan's got it and we'll be good.
Okay, so the motion is to get them to include this swale in their project, in their research.
It's a move to request, yeah.
Okay. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Okay, please, go ahead, Jeff.
One point of clarification. So will we include this with the other one or will we do this as 2 separate?
Separate
requests?
application.
I think separate application would be better.
Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, Josh and Tyler, in terms of other immediate steps that they can legally do, that can be done in the short term, they can't fill it, but they can pump it out, correct?
You should theoretically, yes. That's not really land development. Really, what you'd want to look at is section 6.8 of the zoning regulations, and that really starts specifically. Hang on a second. 6.8.9 kind of has a little checklist of stuff that's permitted, stuff that's conditional use, and stuff that's got an X through it you can't do. So basically, excavating, grading or excavating or anything like that is conditional use. I'm trying to think here, what else we have? Fill is a hard no. Basically draining it out would probably be the thing. And again, I don't think that's really a long-term solution per se, but it's something that theoretically you wouldn't need a permit for.
Okay.
Yeah, you got a public comment.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself, sir, and share your comments.
My name is Colin Curran. I live in 142 Church Street. Just wanted to make aware to the select board that the swale does take in the town's drainage infrastructure, so that does drain into the swale at 2 points. So the swale actually forms part of the stormwater system for the town. And so to say that the town really has nothing to do with it would be a little bit incorrect, because that's where the stormwater is draining. And so even like if pumping out was a solution that should really be on the land owners, it should also be something that maybe the town should be considering of, well, we're draining here. If there's not a holistic solution for that water to drain away to the Winooski River, what is the intent? Is it we're just draining to a swale? Is there, I know that there's an easement for the sewer line that runs through. Is there a drainage easement that comes through these properties? And so there's a little bit more of an issue. It is also part of the town system. And even going back to the runoff at Tilden, I walked it and witnessed water coming all the way from Tilden Avenue to that swale in some of the rainfall. So it comes and it floods on West Main Street.
I didn't.
Yeah, it comes across the railroad, down across the lumber yards, down Borden Street, through the back of my property.
Oh, you mean the break?
Sorry?
Where it's broken?
Not where it's
The
broke.
Outflow is by Richmond Rescue, right?
Yeah, well, the outflow is by Richmond Rescue, but it's flowing overland all the way. It was coming off the road on West Main Street. So it's flowing out of a sewer at the back of one of the properties on West Main Street, flooding the back of that property, flowing across like considerably like a small little river stream across the railroad, through the lumber yard, down Borden Street, and then into the back of the Church Street properties, goes into an inlet and into the swale. So like it's a significant catchment that takes whenever it's raining pretty heavy. And then obviously the town roads of Church Street and Esplanade end up in that swale as well. So there's quite a bit of a catchment that leads to that swale. And I guess my understanding of it was that possibly was higher and would have drained out through the farmyard or farm field and out to the Winooski. But to understand now that that's flowing back is concerning now, because I thought that maybe there had been a ditch or swale that had silted up that was preventing it from draining out. But if it's coming back, that's a little bit more concerning, because again, if the town and there's a lot more drainage ending up in that swale and there's not a holistic solution of, hey, where's that going to drain to? Now we've kind of almost created a ponded area at the back of these properties.
Do you think the Route 2 renovation has had anything to do with it? It's kind of right in the middle of the area you're talking about, over here to there.
I don't know, maybe some of the construction resulted in more of that runoff coming overland, but it certainly the catch basins couldn't take all the runoff, and that was flowing. Well, that actually, I think it was the pipe was over capacity and it was flooding out through the manholes.
Yeah.
So that was both the sanitary and stormwater sewers overflowing.
So it's really apparent to me that the water starts on the other side of the interstate. Yeah. If you walk around when there's a heavy rain, it comes from all over the place. So to say it came from this spot on its way from above the interstate, past Tilden Avenue, past Route 2 on its way to the river, it's a really difficult thing because of the floodplain being where it is between the river and the mountainside where it comes off.
Got to get there somehow. Huh?
It flows. So one of the things we talked about, well, let's just disable all of the stormwater and see where it goes. I'm gonna guess it's gonna end up in the swale, like regardless of where the other pipes go, just because the swale is lower than the village as a whole. So that's part of this question about what's the solution and who's responsible for it. When I tried to take this position with the Agency of Transportation about their interstate highway and their state highway, they were not having it.
Yeah.
And just to follow up on that, when we did ask that question of VLCT, we asked like, okay, because there's the two storm drains on Church Street that flow down. And they said that the way the law works in Vermont is essentially when you put in stormwater infrastructure, if it still drains to the same spot that it would have generally gone to had you not put in the stormwater infrastructure, you are not liable for where that water ends up because it's sort of still flowing to where it used to be. So unfortunately, the downhill property owner continues to have to deal with the water that comes out of their property. So I think that's probably where the Agency of Transportation was cutting at was.
It's coming off the hill.
It's coming up the hill. We're just,
Some of it,
yeah,
but it's still not my
So-
water, it's the mountain.
it
water.
ends up at the
So
low spots.
It's a difficult thing, but I do think we should do a follow-up with Steve and Water.
Yeah, on the sewer.
About wastewater. Is there a thing we can do?
Yeah.
And literally, I was just thinking tonight. the first
manhole
idea
covers
of
you're
the
talking
backflow.
about, yeah.
Yeah, sewage is a
Well,
lot bigger
thinking also
problem than
backflow.
stormwater.
If the issue was that it's flooding at high elevation and instead of flowing down, it's flowing back up.
Yeah. Because the manholes.
You want like check valves, right?
So the lower manholes.
Mhm. There's
And
probably-
if you cover the lower, seal the lower manholes, it's just gonna go further uphill, right?
There's a more
Has-
fundamental problem that started.
But we'll see. I mean, that's an engineering question about what's the right solution. If
They
it's
may have
check
picked up a
valve
lot
or
of mud in
seal,
the sewer line. It's like only this big now instead of being.
Could be.
or elevating the manhole covers. That was another thing I thought of, like, maybe it's too low. If you raise it by 4 feet, then it won't be inundated by water.
That's
But
interesting.
the downside is it's gonna be sticking up 4 feet.
It's,
Tyler?
One thing, because I've heard this, in several different communications and, and talking to other people. And was the first thing I did when I heard about this was I called water and sewer and the highway department to figure out, what we had down in there for infrastructure. And I do think it is important to point out that while the swale does store water, it's, at least from me looking at it and from what I can tell, it's not something that the town built. Rather that it's a existing natural feature, a low point that just happens to collect water. And I'm not saying that, stormwater infrastructure doesn't maybe exacerbate the amount of water that's going down there. But I don't believe that putting that behind Church Street, that was deliberately installed by anybody to store water. It's just something that's there. So that's kind of where it's tricky from us. It's not like the town or whoever, 100 years or 50 years ago put that in there as in an effort to help develop something. I think it's something that's always existed, and that's what makes us hard, right? Because if you could find something that said, okay, this was owned by somebody, they built this was man-made, they put it here for a reason, you can maintain existing infrastructure, right? Without, that falls into a permitted, something that you could permit. But if it's not something that was man-made and it's just a natural feature, it does make it a lot harder to deal with. So I just thought that was worth pointing out, because I looked to see if we owned it or somebody owned it, and from what I can tell from looking at the A&R Atlas and other things, that each part of that swale is just owned by each individual property owner.
Has Pete looked at this?
Mary? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Has
And then
Pete-
Mary.
Pete
Yeah.
Goslin?
Yeah, I went and walked it with him.
Does he have any suggestions on an easy solution?
Not really, no.
Oh. mhm.
Thank you, Barry Hool. Truman and Margaret Powell used to own the farm before Jericho Settlers, and I don't know if they bought that from Danny, was it Danny Pratt?
Pete.
Whatever, okay. So I wonder if it's possible that somebody upstream beyond the interstate has done some alteration to direct this water? Because if so, if somebody, did some development or said, oh, I'm gonna drain this, they're liable for everything downhill. Keith Kaspernak was involved with a case which I cited when Greystone was diverting their water to my land, and the upper landowner shall not direct something that does not occur naturally. And that's what that fill in the blank was doing. And it was washing out my property. So I wonder if somebody, and maybe these agency folks, can follow it up to where it essentially the headwater, where it starts. Maybe there's been a diversion, because although there's been 27 inches of rain this year, it's a problem that may not go away. And I know that you cannot alter something that is a natural occurring structure. If you've already altered it, you have some responsibility for it. But if it's a natural occurring thing, yes, you cannot infill it. But maybe upstream, somebody did something, put in a road, put in a driveway, put in a culvert that diverts the water. And I don't know who's gonna walk it, not me, but that could be a suggestion. Thank you.
Hey, ma'am, in the back. Yes, come up. Either
To the
one of
mic.
you, come on.
One thing I was just gonna say, just looking at,
Go to the mic.
You can't see what's moving there.
I was just gonna say, looking at like historical, and again, it probably goes back to the farmer and what they can do with their land, but looking at historical imagery of that farmland, you can clearly see there is a drain that runs, and it looks like a stream that runs across from what I guess Tyler's described as being a swale. But you can see that that farmland has changed over time as well. And so plowing or rechanging or regrading farmland can happen so often. I think that at some point, sometime, they've now prevented that flow from exiting, and maybe having filled it in is now forcing that water to come back and flow back towards the swale. So again, it could be the engineer looking at it or having it surveyed, what are the elevations in the swale, what are the elevations downstream, but then you would have to have the owner of the farmland to kind of come in and say, yeah, we would agree to either install culverts where you can see where they plow across to allow that water to drain off and head back down towards the Winooski where it's supposed to go. So that's my thought, yeah. But it's not far, like, I mean, it's not far away from the outlet from, what is it, a 90 acre catchment for that storm drain that comes out of Borden Street. So it's quite close to there. I just don't know what the differences in the elevations are. I think that could be tied in.
But this hasn't happened. This hadn't happened until the flood and then the recent past, correct?
This year only.
Yeah, okay, so, I think, this flood is significant, and I can't help but think it's related to what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Sir, ma'am, come on up.
I just wanted to add that when the yard dried this weekend, we saw, right where the swale kind of ends, there's an old culvert in there. It eroded so much of the dirt. So it's been underground. We didn't see it until it just dried.
And that goes to the sewer right on Esplanade, right between our house 62 and the next house. There's a sewer drain that they occasionally clean. And that culvert looks like it completely blocked, but it's on our property. I don't know if that.
We never knew it was there
Flow
until
would
it
just come
eroded.
through there and up that drain to the sewer system, which would be a relatively easy fix if that's the problem.
That's another
Okay.
thing. Because, yeah, I was.
It goes.
Okay.
Days update.
So everybody, this is Jay. Much as I enjoy hydrological engineering, and much as I know that this is a huge concern of the residents of Esplanade and Church, unless my time zone conversion from central to eastern is wrong, it's 10 o'clock. And we have several more items on the agenda. So Tyler and Josh, please do everything you can to follow up on any items that are follow-upable. And please let us know at the next meeting if there's, please let us know immediately if there's anything that we need to do or can do.
I think we have a motion. on the-
Do we have a motion? What was the motion?
It's a motion to apply for this emergency water protection program.
Oh, we never actually took a vote on that. Okay, please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay. Mistakenly, I thought we had voted.
For residents
Okay.
there, just the lost culvert that has now reappeared. If you could send Josh like some, like detail about where that is, because if you didn't know it was there, I suspect maybe nobody knew it was there. So that you can find it or direct water sewer.
Put a one in front of it. What flavor?
Okay.
Okay.
Let's move on to the next. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items. I think some of them could potentially be put off till the next meeting, but Jeff, the next item is yours. It's the update from the Town Center Committee. I am going to leave it to you to dispense that in as much or little detail as you feel necessary.
Okay, I'll make it brief. We had hoped, I'm the chair of the Town Center and Library Committee. We had hoped to come to you tonight with a more extensive presentation to prepare for a bond vote in November. We are not doing that. We got preliminary cost estimates from the architect about a week and a half ago. And it suffices to say it was much more than we had hoped. It is on the order of $10 million. That took the committee somewhat by surprise, and we weren't really happy about that, but you know, it is what it is. And it was a fairly detailed cost estimate with some 200-300 different line items. So what we would like to do, what the committee would like to do is work with the architects to see how we might reduce the overall cost. We're thinking of organizing the cost estimate into must-dos, should-dos, and could-do aspects of the project. And we think we can trim that budget, that bottom line significantly. After what we do this, we want to organize a robust public engagement and outreach process to get community feedback on what we've learned and what the proposed solutions would be. And then we hope to return to the select board in December with a more detailed presentation and a definitive bond proposal for town meeting. We felt the town meeting was a more appropriate time to vote on this anyways, because it'll be, rather than a special meeting in November, it'll be, town meeting is the most it's the most attended, thank you, attended public hearing that we have all year. And of course, we'll continue to explore any grant or other alternative funding possibilities. Other than that, I don't have, there was a bunch of materials in the packet that are on our website for people to look at. I would stress that those are preliminary and those are not final. It'll depend on what we work with the architect as we refine the numbers. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. I hope that was brief enough for you, Jay.
One question.
Jeff, that was great. Questions, Lisa?
Yeah, just a quick question. Was there any one or two items that really surprised you in cost? Or was it just kind of generally a higher than
No,
expected?
so one item that surprised me was the post office. I was hoping that we could do relatively minor upgrades to the post office. What I'm not sure about, and we need to talk to the architects more, there's a pipe trench and that goes around the perimeter of the post office.
Like a swale.
Yeah, like a swale, and it's below the floodplain. And during the flood, that's what flooded, and it flooded the basement.
For the post office.
No, the
So
post office doesn't have a
is on
basement,
slab.
but it flooded our basement, a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. And the solution to that is quite involved. So just doing the renovations on the post office was over $1 million. So that surprised me.
Is it serving a sump pump or something from the basement?
No, it's the reason for the pipe trench is for heating pipes. Yeah, and it was a good place to run around when you were a kid, I understand. When it was a school. So we have some work to do with the architects to refine this proposal and see if we can come up with ways where it's not quite as shocking. Okay,
Sounds good.
That work for you, Jay?
Thank you, Jeff. Certainly. I apologize if you felt like I was rushing you.
No, not at all. I'm here too. I'd love to get out of here too.
So Jay, could I ask?
Please do. Go ahead.
Are there candidates for postponement in J through M?
There's a good idea.
Yes, that's what I was looking at. J, there's no action on, and as the memos notes, for those in the audience, if you're wondering what J is, it's the discussion of stormwater for Southview, Hidden Pines, and Mary Drive. No action to take tonight. That is going to be fleshed out on the 18th meeting. Consideration of applying for NRCS funding. I think That is one that we need to just quickly make a motion on, don't we?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, just review of FEMA buyout and relocation options. I think we could put that off. Pinch point study, I think we could put that off. Discussion of the CD, recommending to buy another CD, that could be done very quickly. So I would recommend that we move on to item K, make the motion, pass the motion, move on to item N, and then do our minutes, warrants, purchase orders, and executive session. Is anybody object to that?
No.
No.
I move to request federal assistance from the Natural Resources Conservation Service to address an undersized stormwater inlet at 102 Tilden Avenue.
I'll second. Lisa?
Okay, we have a motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Lisa Miller, to request federal assistance from NRCS to address an undersized stormwater inlet at 102 Tilden Avenue. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I. Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, jumping forward to the last item, discussion of the CD maturation. Go ahead.
Yeah, could I make one comment on item L, which is the review of the FEMA buyout options for
Yes,
private
and actually, we have a request from a member of the audience that we not put that off. So let's address that one. Go ahead, Jeff.
Okay, so my understanding is the deadline for people to apply for FEMA assistance has been extended by 30 days. It was September 7th and now it's October 7th, I believe, something in that order. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't do it now. They should really get their request in now. I put a post in Front Porch Forum today or yesterday or recently about how you might go about doing that. And I would strongly encourage people for whether it's for assistance, any kind of assistance, but particularly for the buyout, to do it now and to get a hold of folks.
And Jay, just if we push this forward, that both that message, but then to invite Stephanie Smith from Vermont Emergency Management to come back on September 18th.
Yes.
Right. Because Stephanie Hartsfield, we actually otherwise had very little to report tonight. But if you had a question, Stephanie Hartsfield or anybody else in the audience, please go ahead and ask it.
And Stephanie, I got your email. I'll set up an email meeting between me and you and Stephanie Smith to try to get a conversation going there. So I didn't get back to you today, but I wanted you to know I got that and I'll work on that.
Okay, thanks. Last item before we do warrants, purchase orders, and executive session. This is a pretty perfunctory item. One of our CDs a CD we bought in February, 6-month CD, for $500,000 has earned $11,450.19 in interest. The interest rate was 4.6%. And the opinion of our finance director, the account is currently healthy enough where we could do another $500,000 CD. Some rates are listed in the memo for various durations. It would be that if we choose to, we can ask Jim Feinstein, our treasurer, to enroll in another CD, and then Jim and Connie would work to figure out the best interest rate and move forward with setting up the CD. Is there any questions about this whole process or what our next step would be?
Now, we've done this in the past.
Good idea.
Yes.
So I move to recommend to the treasurer that the town set up a 6-month certificate of deposit in the amount of $500,000.
Lisa, I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion from Jeff, seconded by Lisa to request our treasurer to recommend to our treasurer that the town set up a 6-month CD in the amount of $500,000. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I.
Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, let's try to get through the next items relatively quickly. We had 2 sets of minutes to approve, the minutes of 8/21, and then we had a special meeting on 8/23. Are there any questions, additions, deletions, whatever, to the minutes of August 21st? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to accept those?
Okay, this is David. Move to approve the minutes of August 21st.
This
We
is
have a
Lisa.
second.
I'll second.
Okay, motion from David Center, second by Lisa Miller to approve the minutes of August 21st. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, aye.
David, I. Bart, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, we also had the special meeting on August 23rd. Are there any additions, corrections, deletions, emendations whatsoever to that meeting, to those minutes? Okay, it was very quick. It's almost entirely executive session. Is there a motion to accept those minutes from the special meeting of August 23rd?
Jay, this is David, so moved.
I'll second, Lisa.
A motion from David Center, second by Lisa Miller to accept the minutes from August 23rd. Please state your name and your vote.
This is Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay. Minutes, warrants, warrants and purchase orders. We do have a couple free purchase orders, it looks like, Josh.
Yes, 3.
Hey, can you bring those up? Oh, you already have. Okay, thank you. Okay, our first purchase order is for Iroquois truck. I can't read that.
It's purchase order number 4702 to Iroquois Trucks for the foreman's pickup in the amount of $12,907. This is actually for the plow setup on the pickup.
Okay, any questions from the board? Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved by Lisa. For $12,907 to Iroquois truck. PO 4702.
Okay, we have a motion from Lisa. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion from Lisa Miller, seconded by Jeff Ford to approve purchase order 4702 in amount not to exceed $12,907. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next one is purchase order 4702 for Hunger Valley Construction, renovation of 5 windows located on the spires of the library, $10,000. Any questions?
Okay, that's 4720. The other one was 02.
Thank you, 4720.
Just for the record.
No, thank you. You're correct, 4720. Any questions about this? Okay, do we have a motion to accept it?
I'll move to approve purchase order number 4720 to Hunger Valley Construction for the amount of $10,000.
This is
Okay.
David, I'll second.
Motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by David Sander to approve purchase order 4720 to Hunger Valley Construction for an amount not to exceed $10,000. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Our final purchase order is purchase order 4725 to the Hinesburg Police Department for coverage from August and 6 days in July. Total amount $28,655. Questions?
I move to approve purchase order number 4725 to the Hinesburg Police Department in the amount of $28,655.
Lisa, I'll second.
Okay. Motion from Jeff Ford, seconded by Lisa Miller to approve purchase order 4725 to the Hinesburg PD in an amount not to exceed $28,655. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Finally, we need a motion to approve the other warrants as presented. Are there any questions about any of the warrants?
This is David, move to approve.
Art will second.
Okay, motion for David Sanders, seconded by Lisa Miller to approve the warrants as presented. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Art, I.
And Jay, aye. Okay, our next agenda item is items for our next meeting, which will be when I'm in Spain and Bard will be chairing. We've already discussed that we need to review several police-related items. The trucks, the vehicles was one. Kara had at least one other that I think Josh already made a note of. I think we also would need or should discuss the status of the speed cameras, which, as several people have mentioned, have not been functioning. It's not anything I did, because when I last left them, they were working, but then they stopped. What other items do people have for the agenda?
It is. The other thing I was thinking of, Jay, is to invite the chief and give the chief time to talk about activities, data, and
absolutely.
policies
Yeah, I
to
would really like
engage,
that.
like, with us and members of the public.
He speaks.
I was
Okay.
thinking it's with chief time.
That sounds great to me.
Yeah.
Part
Sounds
of our-
good. Okay, of course, we need to come back to the items that we did not cover tonight. and the FEMA buyout in particular.
Yeah, I think that in particular, the pinch point study, it's not urgent.
No,
It's several $1,000,000.
it's all V-Trans.
You know,
Finding
how that's, what that's more relevant to is the Gateway study. There's another study that it's looking at that, how to get from here to
The
there.
pinch point one is pretty simple, though. I think you basically just vote to put it to V-Trans, to put it into the queue for construction. I mean, that to me, unless you want to do something different with it.
It's their money, right?
Well,
Yeah.
so we paid, so the town paid for the study.
Mhm.
And then there's two basic options from here. One, kick it back to V-Trans and say, we got some scope for you. Why don't you engineer these and construct them on your dime? Or the town could say, no, we're gonna do it ourselves, which I don't think the board has any appetite for. So I think it's I think it's literally 2 minutes. I think you guys are gonna go pretty quick.
There's just one that bothers me, that rock outcropping that's right at the edge of the village. I don't remember whether it's one of their pinch points. they didn't.
Let's discuss it.
I don't know that we have to get into the study
let's
itself.
discuss
That's the one I want to
Agenda
ask questions
item.
about.
Okay, sure. I
We
think
we could have it as an agenda item, that's
Yeah.
right.
Agenda
Yeah.
next time, give it a few more minutes, make it 10 minutes to
Yeah.
talk
Okay.
about it.
That's fair. I'm tired. Yeah.
Okay, and we also want to come back to the Browns Court and Volunteers Green Committee, see if we get any more
Yeah, it would be about another notice. So we're looking for 3 members, and probably put a deadline on it.
Mhm.
And maybe follow up from both water, sewer and Pete about the now resurrected culvert.
Yeah, I would love to
I'm
know that.
intrigued If there is a mystery culvert that's been buried in silt for 10 years, like
It's really
maybe that
interesting.
used to drain the swale.
It would be really,
down somewhere.
it'd be really worth it to look at it this week before our
Before it's
more
buried again?
conventional.
Oh, yeah, maybe just a walk around, walk
Yeah.
out. Mhm.
So let's ask Pete and
An update, yeah.
Steve to look at that, and then we can do a follow-up. I think
good
here,
point.
because it's both of those, the swale thing.
Okay. So if you think of anything else, please reach out to Bard and Josh. That said, we have one more item on the agenda, which
Oh, yeah.
is it's on page 11, discussing attorney. You want to go and make the motions?
Yeah, I move to find the premature public knowledge about confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the select board would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
This is David, I'll second.
A motion from Jeff, seconded by David, to move to find that premature public knowledge about confidential attorney-client communication made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to the select board would cause a town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. In the second motion, I note that it does not include inviting Josh into the session, so whoever makes that, could you please do that?
I move that we enter into executive session to discuss attorney-client communication related to the police department under the provision of 1 VSA 313A1F and invite Josh Arneson, the town manager, to join us.
This is David, I'll second.
A motion is from Jeff Ford, seconded by David Sander, to move into executive session under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A1F and to invite Josh Arneson into the session with us. Please state your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Lisa, I.
David, I.
Bart, aye.
And Jay, aye. Okay, Aaron, we will be going into executive session and then coming back to adjourn.
Yeah, Duncan, you can take off.
Good, Aaron.
Thank you.
Thanks, Duncan.
Working too late.
I haven't thought of it in a long time.
That was so revolutionary.
So y'all know the drill. Somebody make a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn. Second.
State your name and your vote.
Jeff, I.
Recording in progress.
David, I.
David, aye. David, aye. David, aye.
Oh, I like that. How many Davids?
Okay,
Happy
so
trails.
I will be out of the country for the next 2 meetings. Bard, enjoy the time and power.
Bart's running the town.
Have a good month off.
You're remaining on the planet, right?
I'm going to be in Spain, Portugal, France, and Italy.
So you gotta be careful when that's a little muddled and you say, I'm going to be in Spain. Make sure the P comes through, otherwise I'm going to be insane.
Or Or in pain.
Well, I think the ship has sailed on that, Bard. Okay, everybody, good night, and I will see you when I see you.
All right.
Have a great.
Hope it's a great trip.
Safe travels.
Mhm.
Take care.